Hey everybody, welcome. We are live. Hopefully everything's working, especially after the snafu that happened yesterday with the live stream. So if you guys were watching, I'll talk about what happened as I'm going here today. But first of all, I want to welcome you to a new location you've never seen on the channel before. This is my kitchen. And the only reason I'm set up here is because my kitchen table gives me the biggest work surface that I have available. So here I am. I wouldn't normally be doing videos here, but I needed a lot of space for this build today, so here we are. Anyway, those who are joining live, you can certainly join us in the chat room. I will be monitoring the chat as we go. This is going to be a casual paced video here. I'm going to take this nice and slow, very much in contrast to what we did yesterday, where, well, I had to fit in a lot of material in a very short window of time. So anyway, yes, also a good lesson to check the chat, as another camera channel says. Yeah, but I knew that I wasn't gonna have time. So anyway, so one of the comments in the chat already was not streaming in 4K today. Well, no, I am not, and I'm actually using, and this will be the first time I've ever used it on this channel, my ATEM Mini Extreme. So yeah, just HD, no 4K out of the ATEM Mini, obviously. And the rack that I'm building today is going to be HD as well. That's not going to be 4K. So considering that this is in my kitchen, today we're going to be baking a FlyPack, a live streaming FlyPack. And for those who are not familiar with that term means, it's just basically a portable rack kit that has essentially everything you need, ready to go. Nice and small. As you can see here, mine's pretty small. This one I have here, I've actually been using for a number of years. I think I got this built this particular version of it, I want to say 2019, so 3 years. So anyway, but I'll start by kind of disassembling the existing one. It is kind of heavy. I'll talk about what I've had in here, how it's worked, whether I've liked it, etc., etc. So, pull off the case here. For some reason, people always ask me what these cases are. They're nothing fancy. This one is a Gator GR2S, which means it's six rack spaces, and that the S means it's the shallow, so it's a lot shorter front to back than a standard rack case. So, components in this one, we've got a Blackmagic SmartView Duo, a television Studio HD from Blackmagic, a Hyperdeck Studio Mini, Blackmagic Studio Converter, a Behringer Minicom compressor, and then lastly, a Hyperdeck VidiU Pro for doing live streaming. And this has actually worked really well. I've been quite happy with it. And Paul in the chat, he and I just used this thing 2 weeks ago for an event. And aside from videos on my channel, I probably use this as much as my trailer for clients. So anyway, it's been super handy to have. And flip around to reverse angle here. Let you see kind of what's in the back. So I've got power switches in the back. There's 8 switches with 8 individual outlets on the back, and then a, what's that, 16 port? Yeah, 16 port network switch, and then all the cables shoved inside. So it's time for a new version of this. And that's what we're going to do here today. We're going to build this. So we'll talk a little bit about the components that are going in here. So you probably would be able to guess that the switcher in the new one's going to be the new ATEM 2ME Constellation HD. And it seems like everybody that's on YouTube that does these sort of videos is getting this exact same switcher. So mine arrived yesterday, like 3 minutes before my live stream happened. So I had to rush out of the trailer to catch the FedEx delivery person to sign for it. And anyway, so this is what's going in here. So for right now, take that off the table. We'll get back to that in a minute. But for right now, I'm going to have to disassemble this. And I'm just going to pull a few cables out of here. And contrary to what Paul says, I don't see any extra cables in there. But yeah, we'll actually pull out the things that are coming out, which is, well, the television studio and ATEM Mini and the Minicom, and this Hyperdeck video will come out as well, but some of these things will be going back in. I'm going to leave the Smart View monitor in for right now. That one's not going anywhere, but the rest of it is pretty much coming out. So, all right. So, as mentioned, I am taking questions in the chat, so if there's something that you wanted to know, I will be checking that as we go. Honestly, before I do all this, I should probably disconnect the wires in the back, so maybe I'll start with that. So, yeah. All right, so let's talk about what happened yesterday. So, yesterday was stream day, and I was out 7 or 6 other YouTubers took half hour apiece to talk about live topics related to live streaming. And when I was the 3rd person that was up, first 2 videos went off without a hitch, and then when it was my turn, it seems like very quickly into the stream, started having connectivity issues. And I wasn't paying close attention to what was going on, so I didn't notice it. And the only reason I did find out was because Photo Joseph actually called me on the phone, and I figured if he's calling me in the middle of a stream when he knows that I'm live, something really bad is going on. So, but yeah, so it was very strange. So I used my Web Presenter 4K in order to do that stream. I wanted to stream in 4K. Traditionally, when I stream in 4K, I've been using OBS with a Blackmagic capture card, a deck link card, and that's always worked. I've never had any troubles with that. And I wanted to try using the Web Presenter. I wouldn't say for the first time, but for the first time on my channel. First time from this house that I just moved into a few months ago. But because it was the first time, I spent a ton of time testing. And I ran test streams all Sunday afternoon, all Monday night, all Tuesday night, using the exact same settings, the exact same stream on YouTube that I was going to be using for the live event. And everything looked great until about 10 minutes before the stream started. You see the back as we work on it? Yes, I can flip around. So you won't be able to see inside very well. So 10 minutes before the stream, I noticed that the Web Presenter was, the cache was filling up very, very quickly, like no data was getting out. And so I reduced the bitrate. I had it on what's called the streaming high setting, and I reduced that to streaming medium, and the problem seemed to go away. The cache stayed at 3% thereon. And at that point, and then a few minutes later, the stream started. And I was, like I said, I wasn't paying attention, so I don't know exactly when things got bad, but apparently it was fairly soon into the stream. And one thing about the Web Presenters, like they do not adapt to changing conditions on your internet connection. And I don't think my internet connection was at fault. You know, I have symmetric gigabit for my internet, so it's a gigabit up, gigabit down, and it has always, I mean always, been very consistent. I mean, I can run speed tests over and over and over again, and they always come up with the exact same results. 930 megabits down, 930 megabits up. And it doesn't seem to matter what server I test against or which speed test site I use. It's always very, very consistent. So I don't think it was my internet connection at fault, but one of the issues with the web presenters is that they do not adapt to changing conditions with your internet connection at all. They assume that whatever bitrate you set them to is always going to be available. So if something changes, they fill up their buffer, and eventually, when that buffer fills up entirely, well, as soon as the buffer starts to fill up, basically viewers are going to start seeing buffering, and they'll get further and further behind. And yeah, eventually, after the buffer is completely full, at that point, video is going to get dropped. You're going to start dropping frames. So anyway, not a great experience for viewers, and I knew that about the web presenter. I'd used it enough to be aware of that, but I also felt like my internet connection was stable and consistent enough that I'd be fine. And turns out that it wasn't. So okay, let's see. Zoom enhance. Yeah, I'll move that camera. Let's see a little bit better what's going on. So, yeah, I find that I stay on this camera the most of the time. We'll see. All right, so let's questions. Let's see. Using the ATEM Constellation, is it possible to send at will different video signals to a wall-mounted TV and a wall projector? Yes, you absolutely can. So the Constellation switchers have multiple outputs. The 2ME that I'm using here today has 12 outputs, and those 12 outputs can all be different signals. So, and you can switch them at any time. And because the signals are synchronized, you get those cuts, those changes, those switches between sources are seamless. There's no glitching or resync issues. All right. Let's see. I don't believe you can scale the outputs, but you can send different signals. Definitely, yeah. So all the outputs are going to be the same signal format. So the format coming out of the switcher is whatever you happen to set the switcher, whatever format you set the switcher to use. So if you set it for 1080p at 29.97, then all of your outputs, no matter what the sources they're coming from, no matter what video format the sources are coming from, will always be at 1080p 29.97, or whatever format you select. So there's the television studio I've been using for the last few years. It has served me very well. Time to upgrade and move on. So, alrighty. Next thing here, we got ATEM. Sorry, it's a Hyperdeck Studio Mini. This is the older one, the version that came out in 2017. This is actually still my favorite Hyperdeck, even with the new ones that have been announced. So, let's see. What do you think about the rumors that the Blackmagic might come up with an intercom product range soon? The new Ethernet style talkback ports on recent products looks very promising. Those have actually been around for a while. Those go back quite a while. That's not something new. I don't know that Blackmagic wants to get an intercom, and they already have some intercom products. Like this is one of them right here. This is the studio converter. This converts fiber to and from SDI, and this has intercom capability. The new switchers have intercom capability, and I wasn't going to get this out till later, but the camera converter, this is the device that lets you do intercom and send video to and from a switcher over fiber. This is what I use, and they work really well. Most of their cameras actually have intercom capability built right in, well, at least the studio cameras anyway. All right, let's see. So we got that out. Let's pull out. Actually, I don't need to remove the studio converter unless I need to get it out to remove the. Oh, it's coming out. Okay. All right, so some commenting on my Yamaha digital piano. That's a Yamaha Clavinova. That's it's getting kind of old now. I've had that since 2003. It's the CVP 207. I've never upgraded it because the newer versions don't really add hardly anything at all, and it still works great. Mine's still in really good shape. I don't actually play the piano, so it doesn't get much use. Let's see, Neil, are you using the ATEM for the actual stream as well? I'm using an ATEM Mini Extreme, and it's just out of frame. I don't think you can, I don't think you can see it there. Yeah, you can't see it there. But the ATEM Mini Extreme is just out of frame. That's what I'm using for the stream today. As mentioned, I think pretty sure that's the first time I have used the ATEM Mini on my channel. All right, so looks like most things have been removed here. A handful of things still left inside, and I will probably leave those inside. So what you can't see in here, back behind here, there's a network router, wireless. I patched the antennas to be external here to get much better signal range and integrity. Let's see. DVE that front cam in top left corner. I could do that. You know, I've got Supersource here, so why not? Okay, let's go to palettes. Supersource. Again, this is a very casual stream here. Camera 1. Oh, I did that wrong. Source, camera 1. Enable box, and then box 2. So we'll make box 2 camera 3, which is this camera behind. I also have an overhead camera I haven't shown you guys yet. It's not going to be super useful, but it's there. So camera 3, set that one to full size, centered. I should have done all this ahead of time, but I knew this was going to be casual, so. All right, cut to Supersource, and then I'm going to change the size of that box in the upper left. How's this for casual, guys? Like adjusting settings on the fly. I'm going to crop the left and right on that, and then we'll move it. Whoop, wrong way. There we go. Okay, cool. And I can go back to the chat. Okay, let's see. Okay, I talked about the cameras that I'm using. So there was a question about that. So the camera that's in front of me, that one right there, is a Sony PXW Z90. The one above me is a Sony FDR AX700, and the one behind me is a Sony PXW Z150. So 3 different models of Sony, all in the same family. Anyway, okay. So what other questions we got here? Why did I go with the 2ME Constellation instead of the 1ME? I'm deciding between both right now and to replace the Television Studio HD. Really, the only reason I did the 2ME is for Supersource. The 1ME doesn't have that, and I use the Supersource all the time. So the fact that the 1ME doesn't have it kind of disqualified it for me. I mean, I know that my Television Studio didn't have it, but I always find that very frustrating. It did have 1ME, so I could do 1 picture-in-picture window, but I couldn't do 2 side by side. So, yeah. Okay, Eric, the 2ME have 2 multi-view outputs, but can you send multi-view 1 and or 2 out on any of the other outputs on the ATEM? Not directly. So what they've done, this confused me a little bit, because when I went to NAB, I checked the 2ME that they had on the floor for that capability, and I went into the ATEM software control on the laptop they had connected, and it very clearly showed multi-view 1 and 2 as selectable outputs, and that confused me. But I took a picture of it. I actually have a picture of that on my phone. But when I went back and looked at it later, what they had done is routed out the multi-view outputs into the 2 of the inputs on the switcher. And I'm going to be doing the same thing here today. So I want to be able to send the multi-view to any of my connected outputs. Yeah, so So I will be rerouting that through the switcher. It's gonna that adds a little bit of latency, unfortunately, but having that additional routing capability is certainly nice. All right, let's see. The 1ME should have never been made. I don't know if I'd go that far. There's going to be a lot of people who don't need Supersource and have less than 10 sources. So, all right, so yeah, so we'll put the Constellation here in the second, or in this available slot. I will do overhead for this shot. Do a little bit of a unboxing here. It's not a real unboxing. I already pulled it out just to make sure that it works and to make sure that my firmware was current. I didn't want to sit around, make everybody sit around watching me upgrade firmware. But yes, it's brand new. Just got it yesterday. This is a lot heavier than the television studio. But there it is. I'll set that up here for a minute. Includes these little pieces so you can remove the rack gears and have a nice smooth surface, and then feet, and then some screws for attaching those. But of course, no power cable, and just like all the other Blackmagic products that use IEC power, they don't include power cables. I get why they do, but it's still a little weird. And they could solve that by just having it be a bundle. Okay, Rob asking, why do you prefer that version of the Hyperdeck Mini? Right here. It has two separate outputs, A and B, and that lets you do fill and key, so you can do alpha channel playback on this unit, which the newer Hyperdeck Mini does not. In fact, I'm going to be adding one of those new Hyperdeck Mini to this rack, and it's noticed on the output it only has one. So older, newer. So they eliminated that feature from this form factor. If you want the separate AB output on the newer ones, you have to go up to the HD Plus, which is a half rack instead of a third of a rack. So you can only fit two of them in a rack space instead of three. So that's why. In today's build, I will actually be putting both of these in there. This one for playback, and then this one for recording. So, in fact, I will be getting to that very, very soon. All right, so there's the Constellation. Slide it in. Actually, let me give you guys a brief tour of it first before we do that. So I'll go back to overhead here. All right, so front panel, you obviously got your 20 buttons for choosing your inputs, cut and auto for doing transitions. You got a few buttons over here for choosing sources, so bars, black, media player 1 and 2. Then you got some buttons here for, well, key 1, downstream key, so that's upstream key 1, and then 2 downstream keys, and then a fade to black. 4 buttons for choosing transition types, so you got mix, wipe, dip, and DVE. They didn't include stinger on the front there, it's really, really odd. They also don't include a Supersource button on the front. Very strange. Buttons for navigating the menu, obviously a wheel for navigating the menus. Come over here, there's your intercom connection. Button for talking to production, button for talking to engineering, button to call. Like in intercom, they have a feature called call. You press it and it'll flash a light on someone's belt pack. And then we have program mix, which allows you to include the program audio in your headphones. And then some up and down buttons here. So yeah, Supersource is a strange, not having Supersource button on here is a strange omission because they really push that. It's a little odd to see that. Probably doesn't need separate mixes for buttons for DSK 1 and 2. They kind of put Supersource up there. Anyway, once I get this powered up, I'm gonna show you something I learned about this series a while ago that I think is new for Blackmagic switchers, and that's the ability to actually control the audio mix very easily from the front panel, or at least the levels. Anyway, so okay. I mean, the 2ME has how many Supersource? It has one Supersource that can accept up to 4 video sources. So, yeah. Okay. All right. 1 ME is basically an ATEM Mini with SDI connections. SDI is awesome. Yeah. SDI is amazing. I do not use HDMI in real productions if I can get away with it. But there are a lot of feature differences between the ATEM Mini and the Constellations. For example, the ATEM Mini have built-in streaming. The Constellations do not. ATEM Minis have built-in recording. The Constellations do not. So if those are features that are important to you, the Constellations may not be the right product. The other thing that's missing on this compared to some of the higher end switchers is 4K. This is only HD. I think I probably mentioned that, but oh, and then a little brief tour of the back. So, all right, power input, control, which is network, talkback, which is for intercom. That's analog audio, just line level audio. There's 2 channels in and out. Reference in, that's for Genlock. And then we've got our 20 inputs, obviously SDIs, 12 outputs, 2 multi-view connections, and then 2 analog audio inputs there. So pretty dense. Oh, and there's also USB-C. And this does have the webcam feature on it. If you want to connect it to a computer, it pretends to be a webcam. So there's that. All right. I'll get this sucker rack mounted. Throw some screws in there. There it is. Anybody who watches this channel know I'm a big user of DeWalt tools, and this is probably my most recent acquisition. This is one of their new impact drivers. It's tiny and actually very powerful. I think I have like close to 50 DeWalt power tools now. It's kind of crazy. Alrighty, what other questions have we got? Is there any way the second HDMI output on the ATEM Mini ISO can be transitioned instead of only cutting between when outputs are changed? No, you cannot. That would be basically a second mix effects engine in order to make that happen. And they are 1 ME switchers. So if you wanted to do that, you need a 2 ME switcher like this one. That's one of the reasons that we have 2 ME switchers. Okay. How many resolve keys do I have at this point? I think only 2. I don't use resolve on a daily basis, so that may surprise people. I think everybody feels like I'm a huge Blackmagic fanboy, and that's actually one of the farthest things from the truth. I use Blackmagic equipment a lot, but it doesn't mean that I love all of it. You know, I've had my issues. All right, so other space here at the bottom. Actually, I think I'm going to move this down, and I'll put this. Yeah, I'll do that. But so yeah, I'm going to do ATEM, or say Hyperdeck Studio Mini in the middle, and then the new Hyperdeck Studio Mini HD on the right, and then there's available space right here. That's where I'm going to put my Video Pro. So that's the plan. So start securing some of that. Supersources is invaluable. Honestly, anybody wish they had like 8 Supersources. Yeah, I would love if the Supersources actually would support more Windows. So it would certainly be nice. I had an event I got hired for a while ago, and we needed to do 6 windows up on screen at a time. Personally, I think if you got 6 windows going up on screen at a time, things are probably getting too busy, and you maybe want to rethink things. But I had to figure out how to do 6 sources on screen at once, and the way I pulled it off was using my ATEM Mini Extreme going into my 2ME Production Studio 4K switcher. So 2 layers. So all right. Yeah, Tom, when I used the intercom in college, the call button displayed a loud tone, and we were told never to use that button. Yeah, the call often does include an audible tone. It doesn't have to. The way the feature works doesn't have to have an audible tone, but they very often do. So just kind of an unfortunate side effect. But the whole purpose of the call button is to get somebody's attention when they're not paying attention. So, all right. So I'm going to figure out a way to secure this. So I'm going to use these 3M brand, I think. got those out around the other side of the table here. Grab those. I need to be able to pull this out to check the connections, and this has a USB connection on the side, and you can use that for plugging in a cellular modem, which I do a lot. And so I have to be able to reach in here and grab this and pull it out. So I've traditionally used these Scotch connectors, which are very strong, but at the same time they're a little bit too strong. So I think in this case I'm gonna just go with Velcro. I'm not sure I grabbed the Velcro though. I did not, so I'll have to do that later. So for now, well, that will have that weight. Alrighty. Let's see. So with only one supersource, your X keys options get limited, or can you set up macros to adjust the supersource? I've never personally taken the time to modify my supersource stuff to work with two supersources. There have been a couple people who watch the channel who have taken the time to do that. And it can be a little awkward, not necessarily because my code is poorly written, but because of the way the multiple supersources are handled inside of an ATEM switcher. So yeah, not my fault. If I ever do get a Constellation 4K or 8K, I guess as it is, or if they come out with a 4K, then I'll probably take the time to rework it and make it work properly with two supersources. But I've primarily written that code for me. So if I don't have the need for something, I generally don't take the time to do it. So, a little selfish, I know. And the fact that I publish it and make it available for people is just kind of a bonus. It seems like there are a lot of people who have really liked it though, so I'm glad I've made it available. Especially since I started moving the downloads over to Discord link, or moving the download links over into Discord. That way I know people for sure know how to get to Discord so they can direct their questions there. That has been a huge problem in the past. People emailing me pretty much every day for help on that. And since I moved to Discord, that problem has just gone away. All right. Let's see. Aaron saying, yeah, done 6 layouts on screen with ATEM Mini Extreme ISO. Yeah, the ATEM Mini, in fact, this new one too, you can do 4 sources with Supersource and then use the 2 DVEs for 2 additional ones. So that it is entirely possible to pull off 6 sources on screen at once with these switchers. So. Somebody asking about SIM cards with mobile streaming. So I used to have SIM cards for T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon, all 3. And I found that I was never using the AT&T and Verizon ones, so I got rid of them. So at this point I have a bunch of T-Mobile, and then I also have Google Fi, which is, again, T-Mobile. I did that mainly for the much cheaper rates. Ooh, that's a little tight. Need to unscrew some things here. But that's always provided the connectivity that I need. Not necessarily just always with one SIM, but sometimes I'll need 2. But in the area that I live, T-Mobile has the best coverage, which I know is not universally true. But it is true here. Oh, those screws are in the way. And most often I will use venue internet whenever I possibly can. It's not always possible, but whenever I can. I do. You know, I was actually going to lay this out a little differently. Yeah, I need to change that. My mistake. I wanted to put playback, record, and then streaming in that rack space. So yeah, I have to remove that. Aaron asking, and I knew this question was going to come up. Any reason for not using the Web Presenter HD for encoding instead of the VDU? Reliability. The web presenters have proven to be not reliable. And they also don't support bonding, which has been absolutely critical to getting reliable connectivity. So, more often than you'd think, venues don't have, especially around here, even though we have high-speed internet options available pretty much everywhere, fine venues just don't want to pay for high-speed internet. And yeah, so more often than you would think, find that venues don't have enough bandwidth to stream reliably. And so I have to combine the bandwidth from the venue with a cellular connection. And the VDU does that, the web presenters do not. So but yeah, it comes down to reliability. Web presenters just don't have it, unfortunately. I wish they did, you know, because otherwise they're a pretty cool product, but I've found that you just can't rely on them. So I'm not using them. One of the things I like about the video stuff, I only have to have one ShareLink account across all of my video devices. So I currently have 4 video devices. One of them doesn't support ShareLink, but the other 3 do. And so I only have to pay 1 subscription for all 3 devices. And that gives me streaming, bonding on all of those devices. So. Alrighty. Constellation, USB capture. Okay, okay. So I know a lot of people get kind of excited about the fact that a lot of these devices have USB. So the Constellation has USB. The newer Hyperdecks have USB. ATEMs have a USB. Problem is, Blackmagic does some weird stuff with the video signal levels on those USB connections, and you find that they crush your blacks and it boosts the contrast too much. So, not ideal. And they also reduce the resolution pretty significantly too. So, yeah, not ideal. Okay. So one supersource means one on program at a time, but it can look differently, but only on one output at a time. So, so the supersource is just a combination of up to 4 windows on screen. So like what you're seeing right now. So that's 2 cameras on screen. You can do up to 4 at a time. You position them however you want, whatever size you want. On the lower end switchers, the ATEM Mini and the Constellations, they don't have the ability to do a border around it, but the higher end switchers do. So you get into your 2ME Production Studio, 4K, the 4ME Broadcast Studio, and a Constellation 8K. They can also put a border around that. Out of the box, there's no way to move those around in real time other than like manually adjust it or store presets in macros. But a bunch of people, including me, have created software to move those around and animate them. So if that's something that someone wants to do, there's software to make that happen. So I'll give a plug here for Mix Effect. If you guys haven't tried that out, it's an app that runs on iOS devices, like iPads, iPhones. They recently added the ability to do animation for Supersources, and also Central Control is now doing that as well. So. Chris Williams, the 8U rack for my ATEM 2ME Constellation FlyPack arrives tomorrow, so the stream is perfectly timed. Yeah, and there's a lot of people that are getting these things right now, so they're thankfully finally shipping. Okay, so I can start wiring up a few things here. Unfortunately, I don't know which of these cables goes where, does what. So I'm gonna have to do some experimentation. I have a feeling this one was probably the switcher before. Switcher and Hyperdeck. I might have to pull. Let's see. I might feel it. Maybe that's switcher and Hyperdeck. What would this other one be? I don't know. I'm gonna find that I have to pull that at some point. Anyway, there are a few connections I can make here. So, I don't know if you can be able to read this, but I've mapped out how I'm going to do my inputs and my outputs. And I'll start connecting up a separate rear panel here in a little bit, but for right now I can actually start wiring some of the internal stuff. So I will do that. All right. Okay, input 1 comes from Studio Converter. I'm certainly gonna need to make some SDI cables as part of this. Like there weren't enough in here from the get-go in order to make this all work. So, but we'll cross that bridge as we come to it. So. Did you ever replace the stock Hyperdeck fans with the silent Noctua ones? I did a couple years ago, and it's the difference between night and day. I believe that it is. I've never done it myself. I've never had a big issue with the noise on most of this equipment. You know, it's in an enclosed rack, so any noise is pretty self-contained in here. And like, I'm not working in silent rooms much at all. So, but if I needed silence, that would be certainly an upgrade that I would do. All right, so input 1 is going to come from, I don't know if you guys probably can't see this. I'll turn this a little bit more your way. So input 1 is coming from Studio Converter output. See if I have a, let me sort these by size so that I get the shortest ones on the shortest runs. Just reduce the amount of cable clutter inside as much as possible. Okay, so input 1 comes from Studio Converter, output 1. From Studio Converter, output 2. And then 3 comes from output 3. And then, big surprise, input 4 comes from Studio Converter, output 4. I know it's going to shock everybody. Alright, now I've got the wires here for my monitors. So hook those up. So the left monitor, SmartView Duo 1, it's output number 9. So that goes right here. And then the right monitor, output 10. Oh, that's a little bit of a tight squeeze, but that works. All right, and that leaves me with one dinky. I wonder if this is actually useful. All right, so Hyperdeck player, which is the one on the left. Yeah, that's not gonna, I'm not gonna be able to use short cable on that. Hyperdeck recorder, output number 12. That's here, and that needs to go down here, so that short cable won't work for that either. And that's too short to go from multi-view outputs into the inputs, so that cable is not going to be useful. So any additional connections I make, I'm going to need to make cables, which I am prepared to do. All right. So I don't do bonding at the router level. No, I do not. I do bonding at the video streaming. So what kind of issues have you had with the web presenter? What errors popped up? So it's never errors. It's always, it's trying to send more data than it thinks the internet connection is able to handle. That's been the issue. So like yesterday, my live stream yesterday, I was trying to send 22 megabits, and apparently my gigabit internet connection was not fast enough. And the web presenters just don't recover from that very well. They don't adjust their data rate at all. So they make the assumption that whatever data rate you set is always going to be available. And even when it's not, for whatever reason, it just keeps sending more data and filling up the buffer until the buffer fills up. And yeah, I'm not impressed with the web presenters. I might even sell mine. I just find it not very useful. Is the Hyperdeck Wave encoder monitor compatible with the Blackmagic ATEM Minis? Sure, yeah, because I mean you just need an HDMI video source to go into those. So, yep. Crushed blacks, reduced contrast, sounds like operating at full space rather than limited range. And that is exactly what happens with the USB connections on the Blackmagic equipment. So the USB webcam feature, it's sending, let's see, so if it's crushing blacks, that means it's expanding out the levels. So that means that the internal levels, we'll assume 8-bit for purpose of discussion. Blacks are supposed to be at 16, whites, peak whites are supposed to be at 235. What that means is when they send it out over USB, it's taking that 16, converting it to a 0, taking that 235, converting it to 255. So, yeah. And I've heard a lot of people complain about it. A lot of people talk about the color issues with the USB connection on the Blackmagic stuff. Yeah. You consider using a different brand for the switcher. It is just bang for the buck with the BMD stuff, or their products provide some features that other brands don't have. It's mostly bang for the buck, but at the same time, features too. I'm not aware of any hardware switchers at anywhere near this price point that provide that Supersource functionality. So if you want to be able to do multiple windows on screen and have it be affordable, Blackmagic is really kind of the only game in town. So. Rear camera is probably closer. What? When you talk about physical distance? Yeah. The rear camera, this one back here is about 7 feet away from me. The one in front of me is like 20 feet away. So, what are the antennas connected to? So these antennas go to a little ASUS router that's inside the case. It's actually sitting on top of this switch. I'd pull it apart, but it was kind of a nightmare to get it in there. All right, so let's see what we got here. There's a PoE. I'm going to get some of these connected so they're out of the way. They're just Ethernet. This is, by the way, a PoE and managed switch. So, oh, I think that's internet. I should have left some of this alone. So yeah, the first 8 ports on here provide power over Ethernet, and I use that to run either Blackmagic equipment, like, I mean, obviously I wouldn't hear, but like the old Hyperdeck Studio Mini does support PoE. You can be powered over, this one over here, can be powered over Ethernet. The newer ones do not, so a feature that they lost. But I have my PTZ cameras set up where they can do PoE. I have a lot of Audinate AVIO adapters that can do PoE, and so I just have to plug those into these Ethernet jacks here on the back, and then they get internet connectivity and they get power. So that's super handy. The other 8 ports here are not PoE; they're just normal. But this is being a managed switch. I have it set up in multiple VLANs. So these 4 ports here and these 4 ports here are my local LAN, and then I've got audio on these 3, and then this one. My internet connection goes here. 2 more. Yeah, well, 4 more for my LAN, and then trunk ports here, which will be used to connect to my trailer and provide those VLANs over, well, multiple VLANs over a single connection. So, yeah. Do you need to worry about AC power introducing noise into your audio signals? Well, I'm using balanced audio, so yeah, it shouldn't be a problem. How you started your production company, and any tips for starting a production company? Well, you need to establish a name before you're going to be able to get clients. So if you don't have experience, you're going to need to get some experience, which usually means working for somebody else. And then once you've kind of established your reputation, you can start to take on some jobs on your own. figuring out how to get clients is really the big challenge, and I'm not a great one to ask about that. All my jobs have ever come pretty much all my jobs have come word of mouth. And so it just takes time for word to spread about what services you're providing. So yeah, some places advertising can work well. Like I've got a good friend who has a production company in Houston, Texas. And he was telling me that he signed up for Production Hub, paid for one of their promoted listings, and all of a sudden he started getting phone calls like crazy. And he's been extremely busy just from doing that one thing. I tried the same thing and I've gotten nothing. I don't think I've ever gotten a call off the Production Hub, my Production Hub listing. So yeah, your mileage may vary. All right, before I go too far, there's a few things that I'm going to need to install inside this case. Explain why. I'll show you what the rear panel is going to look like. So switch it overhead here. Maybe it's better on the other one. You can see that better. Yeah. All right, so 4 fiber connections, and I put these behind latching doors so that I can keep dust and dirt out of there. Doesn't matter how hard I try, I can never get my crew to protect the ends of my fiber cables or connections. So this is going to be my attempt at trying to alleviate that a little bit. So yeah, fiber on these 4, and these are too wide to stick next to one another, so I put BNC connections between them. But anyways, input 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on BNCs. Input 9's HDMI. 4 outputs on BNCs, output 5 on an HDMI, and then my 2 audio inputs. And these are TRS, XOR combos. So I can plug in either one. And then those just go to TRS connections on the other end to go into the back of the switcher. So most of that's pretty straightforward. You know, it's just patching the connections inside the rack. But the HDMI, they need to go through a converter. So, did I grab it? I don't think I grabbed it. I have, yeah, there we go. One of the Blackmagic bidirectionals. And that's powered off USB-C, so I need to, somewhere in here, fit a USB power adapter. So that's one of the next projects. And I need to, let's see, what do I use to attach that? And use those 3M things, which I seem to have misplaced. Just by show of hands in the chat, how many of you watching actually have a FlyPack kind of like this? And when you vote, tell me which switcher you're using and what type of event you typically do. How do you deal with audio? Constellation does have some kind of DSP. So yeah, the Constellation actually does have some DSP capability. It has full equalization, 6-band EQ, well, 4-band plus shelves. No, 4-band plus high pass, I think. And then it has a compressor, a gate, an expander on every channel. So I will no longer have to use, you can't see it, but I'll no longer have to use my Blackmagic, or say my Behringer Minicom to do audio compression. I'll be able to do it directly in the switcher. So, okay, so I'm going to use this Anchor device for providing USB power, and I'm going to attach that to the top of my Constellation. And I need to step out of frame for a minute. And join me on my walk over to my office. I don't know how long this recipe is going to take. It's going to be a while. I knew this was going to be a long stream, so I won't be offended if people have to leave and come back, because I know it's going to be long. What's the point of having high bit rate if it's not going to adjust? High VBR, yeah. The VBR that's referred to by the Blackmagic streaming stuff is variable bitrate based on what video it's encoding, not based on the available bandwidth. They really don't seem to do anything at all to adjust for available bandwidth, which is unfortunate, and like I said, got me in trouble yesterday. That's really what caused my stream to malfunction yesterday. So. Are the Ultra Studios also affected by the USB color issue? I assume not. I don't think so. I think that those are actually better. I haven't had a problem with those. It seems all the USB out use the same chip. It probably uses the same code in the FPGAs to do that encoding. And so it's something they could fix if they wanted to. I love how loud this stream is. I guess if anyone's going to have good audio levels, it's you. I'm not doing anything fancy for this at all. So I'm wearing a Sony lavalier wireless microphone, which is going into one of the cameras. And that camera, all the levels of stuff is being done by the camera. So I put the camera level on auto, and it's adjusting the gain. So that's it. All right. ULET's technologies. When I grew up, I got to be like you. Flattering, but you don't really want that. Let's see, we got a few people that are watching videos on information on how to build a streaming setup, which that's a good way to do it. Another camera channel, it's 2ME Constellation HD, so same thing I'm doing. ATEM Studio 4K Pro, no fly case. Yeah, with that one you don't necessarily need one. So Constellation 2ME concerts mainly, nice. How much delay do those SDI HDMI converters cost? So these guys right here, I measured it. It's about 0.1 milliseconds, so next to nothing, completely unmeasurable. So yeah, I would not worry about delay on those. HD Studio, program for local government, nice. Television Studio HD, nice. Joshua building one. Wife came in and saw the wires and components spread everywhere and said, I gotta go shopping. Nice, I like it. Constellation DSP also have audio delay for analog input. I assume this one does too, but I haven't checked that yet, so we'll find out here once I fire this up. All right, let's get this USB deal plugged in. Matthew Miller, similar FlyPack television Studio HD Hyperdeck Mini Video Pro PTZ optics camera. So in your case, the PTZ optics camera is the only thing different from what I've disassembled here today. So yeah. ATEM Mini Extreme FlyPack unit, SKB injection molded 4U case. Nice, yeah. MacBook Pro, yeah. Wireless transmit and receive for cameras, nice. I don't do a lot with wireless. I mean, I have several wireless systems, but I find that I don't use them much. They all claim to have zero latency and they're completely lossless, but I haven't found one where that's actually true. The one that I use the most, my Cinegears, if the signal strength is good, the image quality can be good, but that isn't a guarantee. Let's see, what do I need to do with this guy? These are not long enough. I might have to go into my storage to get some longer. 2 feet, that's gonna be long enough. To get some longer Ethernet, but I might be all right. I keep a whole ton of Ethernet cables on hand. I'll have this one go up here. A little long, actually. I could get away with some shorter ones. What length are these? These are like they're 1 foot. Yeah, 1 foot. That's going to be too short, I think. Yeah, too short. Those also look like 1 foot. Yep. One of those deals, like you never have exactly what you need, right? Okay. What do you use when you need to update the firmware on BMD products when it's all in the case? A lot of their products will let you do the firmware updates over Ethernet now. The ones that require to be done over USB are dwindling quickly. So in this rack build, the only ones that require doing over USB are going to be the converter, which probably never actually needs a firmware update, honestly, and the studio converter. But it's only, in the 4 or 5 years I've had those, it's only ever received one firmware update. So I'm not terribly worried about it, honestly. So, alrighty, need to do power before I go too far. I've got a 3-way IEC power splitter here. Eddie, still need to go through the Dante certification training. I was talking to one of the Dante reps at NAB, and apparently they have completely redone the level 3 training from the ground up. So, and it's supposed to be a lot easier to follow now. The previous version was really designed for IT guys who already know how to do most networking stuff, and I guess they've redone it so it's a little more friendly to people who have a little bit less experience with that kind of thing. So, well, yeah, should be better now. At least that's what the guy who does the training told me. So, Patrick something or other. So, poor Paul was with me and bored to tears when I was having a conversation with that guy. Okay, so this guy probably stick over here. I'm going to try using another of these Scotch deals. Power Jam is building a large FlyPack with ATEM 2ME. I assume you mean the new Constellation, not the production studio. Astro, I don't have a FlyPack personally. Main client does. Thinking about building one. Yeah, they're super handy. It's nice to be able to just grab and go. Blake, I work live streaming events. We've recently been running into issues with audio and the video lag. All Blackmagic products seem to be in sync until going into Wirecast. Seems to be Wirecast. That might not be Wirecast. I've heard other people talk about sync issues with Blackmagic stuff going into a computer. So I haven't heard of a definitive solution to that problem, but I have heard that just changing your configuration can make it better. So if you're sending audio through the Blackmagic, try sending it externally, not through the Blackmagic, or vice versa. So yeah, again, I haven't heard a single definitive solution that always works, but it seems that just changing things up can fix it. Chris, I use small condensers for audio into a mixer and EQ to the XLR inputs on the BMT television studio switcher. That's kind of what I've been doing in the past, but because these new switchers have much better audio handling, I can get away without a separate compressor now. At least in theory. We'll see. My portable system is a single camera with a YOLO Box Pro and Starlink with a solar battery for power. Very compact and only minutes to get set up and running. And you got satellite. How does the YOLO Box actually handle Starlink? Because I'm finding that different encoders handle it differently. The Blackmagic ones do not like Starlink at all. I can tell you that from experience. The Hyperdeck ones, if you use ShareLink, they work great on Starlink. If you don't, they will cut out on you. OBS, when I tried it, would drop frames, but it would otherwise work fine. So, Warren County Schools, ATEM Television Studio 4K with a separate rack that has video router, Mac Mini, CG, HyperDecks, and Web Center, sports graduations, government meetings. Cool. Yep. Chris, I also have lag issues with wireless cameras. I just exploit broadcast software. Yeah, your less expensive video wireless systems will have lag. That's kind of the nature of the beast, unfortunately. And I know a lot of people get the Hollyland wireless stuff. It has really long latency, really long lag. So, yeah, if that's what you're using, that's why it's your wireless system doing it. So sometimes you can compensate, sometimes you can't. In a setup like this, you can't. There's nothing here where you can adjust any of your delays anywhere. So it's unfortunate, but it's kind of the way things are. All right. Power for the converter here. Will this rack weight be manageable? Sometimes wheels help. This one might be a little bit heavier than it has been in the past, but the weight difference is going to be very minimal, and it's been very manageable. I don't know if Paul's still watching, but he and I got hired to do an event a couple years ago where we had to climb a bunch of scaffolding with this and camera equipment, and it worked fine. So, able to climb the scaffolding. One hand carrying this equipment up with the other, not a problem. Hi from Norway, thanks for your help with SS macros on Discord the other day. How do you handle tally on non-BMD cameras? This guy right here, the camera converter product handles tally. It's not a great solution for it, but it has LEDs on the end, red LEDs on the end that light up when it's live, and then if you're watching your own camera feed on the video output of this, it puts a red box around the frame so the camera operator knows when they're live. So, yeah. Talking about better audio handling, my ATEM Mini Extreme ISO stopped handling audio out of the blue and never came back, and the ATEM Mini stopped audio output. All too common tale, unfortunately. Yeah, these things kind of happen, unfortunately. I use Hollyland Mars transmit and receive units for some cameras. I use regular consumer grade HDMI wireless. Yeah. Yeah. Eddie, I'm not saying don't use Hollyland, but I'm saying don't use the Hollyland Mars stuff. If you want to get reliable wireless video with Hollyland, step up to their Cosmos series. It's going to be quite a bit better. Talking about wireless video, I got nothing beats VizLink. I've never used it. I can't say for sure. Greetings from Logan, Utah. Nice. Not far from here. I have not revealed what city I moved to after my recent move, and we'll keep it that way, but I am slightly farther away from you than I used to be. I'll say that much. I think that lineup ATEM should have better names. The 1ME should have been called, should have just been called Constellation HD, and then 2ME for a matter of taste, you know. What are the best solutions for bonding internet signal? Oh boy, we're going to open that can of worms. Go to Discord and talk about that. There's a lot of people that have very strong opinions about that on my Discord channel. So, yeah, if you want to get involved in that discussion, that's the place to go for that. I only do bonding for my streaming portion because it's a very simple solution. I use the Hyperdeck ShareLink service or Core, mostly ShareLink, but could use either one. And then for internet for computers and whatnot, I just use the Venue or Cellular Hotspot or something like that. For my trailer, I actually have Cellular and Starlink now, so neither one's a bonding, but yeah. Alrighty, so it looks like I need to start making some serious quantities of SDI cables. I've got a lot of connections left to make here. Doing a show in Provo Orem area yesterday. Nice. So yeah, in my general vicinity. Wireless video is an entire industry. I think you can get it for $500. I think it steps up the industry standard is a little bit delusional. Yeah, that's honestly a little bit true. You can get wireless for that price, but you're not getting good wireless for that price. So. All right. Gonna check on some streaming numbers here. 116 watching, 747 have tuned in at some point. Nice. Okay, like I say, I need to start doing some SDIs. So, studio converters I've hooked up. Rear BNCs, I will do those last. HDMIs, again, I'll do those last. Input, Hyperdeck. Okay, Hyperdeck. Those are good ones to do. So playback A and B, those need to go to inputs 11 and 12. So don't need to go too long on those cables. I think I'll switch to the overhead camera for this. You guys can watch me make the cables. There are the ends. There are two of the tools. There's the other one. Okay. All right. I don't know if I've ever made these cables on a live stream before. I've done videos on how to do it. But I have quite literally done thousands of these. That's not an exaggeration. I probably did just 1,000 of them in my trailer alone. And then I've been involved in other installations. Wirecast or vMix, asking for a friend. Sure you are. It seems like Wirecast has really diminished in popularity over the last few years. I used to hear people talk about it all the time. These days, all the hype here is around vMix. And if I'm honest, I haven't used Wirecast. I mean, aside from just goofing off with it briefly a few years ago. But yeah, I'm not really an expert. I have used vMix a fair amount. I today used vMix for replay. I don't use it as a switcher. But I don't know, you're just gonna have to look at the features of each and see which meets your needs. But also ask the question over on Discord. There are a lot of people who have experience with that stuff over there. There are a lot of people on my Discord channel that have more experience in video than I do. So I know people look to me as an expert in this, but I'm still learning just like everybody else. Alrighty, so going from here, that's going to input 11, is right there. So make that cable about so long. Thank you for the compliments. Always appreciate that. Yeah, you guys are gonna see a lot of crimping going on here today, so I'm gonna have to make quite a few cables. I don't know if you guys watched the video I did a few years ago where I swapped out the 1ME switcher that I had with my 2ME, but I had to crimp. Probably 100 cables for that project, but I just did that one in a time lapse. I didn't live stream that project. try and keep this in frame. All right, Astro, I don't know anyone who has made one cable and not made thousands. Yeah, it's kind of like once you know how to do it, you never buy them again. Not only that, like everybody and their dog seems to know that you make your own cables, and they'll come to you every time they need one. So, yeah, pros and cons, right? So, so I saw someone ask about brand of cable. The cable itself is Belden 1505A. And I'm using Canary BCP B4F connectors. So, best combination I've found. Canary makes some amazing cable too, so I don't want to discount them. Their cable is awesome too. But I've been using Belden 1505 for ever, and it just worked. I have never, in the thousands of cables that I've made, had one have one not work. I have had them go bad. That's usually due to physical damage by somebody doing something stupid. But they have never broken on their own, of their own accord. So. All right, Neil asking about the basement. Things haven't changed a ton since I did my update video. When was that? April? I made some progress. I'm finding that I have other projects that are more time critical, and so all the time that I would spend on the basement, it seems to be going to other things. My backyard here at this house is kind of a project waiting to happen. The prior owner of this home never finished the basement, or never finished the backyard. It's just basically dirt, and the weeds have completely taken over. I misplaced my cutter. Where'd I put my cutter? Seriously, I misplaced my wire cutter. I know it's here. I've been using it. There it is. All right. So I have not been making as much progress on the basement as I wanted. I have made some. I finished building the wall between the home theater and my workbench area. That's done. Aside from the outer layer of drywall, but I probably haven't mentioned this, but I'm going to hire somebody to do the final drywall. I just don't have the time nor patience, and I'm getting older. And moving big 80-pound sheets of drywall around isn't as easy as it used to be. So if I can hire somebody to do it for $25, $35 an hour, you know I'm going to do that. So I'm focusing on framing, and then I'll hire somebody to come in and do the final drywall for me. But my next room is going to be the YouTube room. That is going to be happening sooner than later. The reason I had to do the workbench area first was because most of the boxes that I was storing in that YouTube room needed to go to the workbench area. And I've done that now. That's done. So the room that's going to be my YouTube room is not entirely empty, but mostly empty at this point. So progress. It's progress. But the other issue is, like, so some of the stuff I have a hard time doing by myself, and I need help from friends. And it isn't always easy to schedule that help, and I always feel a little bit guilty asking as well. So. Opinion vMix versus Blackmagic, hardware versus software switching solutions. Okay, I'm going to do a full video about this at some point. I haven't done it yet, obviously, but each has pros and cons. For what I do, the way that I work, hardware is really the only viable option. And the main reason for that is I do a lot of events where we have iMag going on. So we're sending your video up to projector. Hardware switchers have less latency than software-based solutions, usually significantly less. So like the Blackmagic switchers, the average latency on those is half a frame. which means that any video signal going into it is going to be delayed by nothing, 0, or up to 1 frame. So maximum latency on a Blackmagic switcher is 1 frame from input to output. Hardware switchers, software-based switchers, the way that they work, they have to basically ingest the entire video frame first before they can do any processing on it. Then you've got some processing time, and then they can send that video frame to the output buffer so that they can be sent out. So minimum latency on a hardware or on a software switcher is 2 frames. Typical latency is 2.5 or more if you're doing any sort of processing on it. So if you're doing iMag, hardware switchers are kind of really your only viable option. But if you're not doing iMag, software switchers give you a lot of additional functionality that you don't get with hardware switchers. Like, for example, ingesting NDI video signals, which is something you can't very easily do on a hardware switcher without having a converter to convert from NDI over to, that didn't cut right. Converting over to SDI or HDMI or whatever you happen to be using. So it all depends on your workflow. You know, if you're primarily live streaming and you want lots of features, software switchers are a great option. And the other thing I should mention is that hardware switchers tend to scale a little bit better. Like, you're going to have a hard time finding many switchers, software-based switchers that have 40 inputs. It's harder to do, a lot harder to do in software. So it's not that it's not possible, but it's a lot harder. But hardware switchers to also, well, if you're using Blackmagic, tend to be less expensive than software-based options, like a TriCaster or a vMix or whatever, by the time you factor in the cost of a computer and everything else that you're going to need. So anyway, it's based on your use case. There's no one size fits everyone when it comes to hardware versus software switchers. So I didn't get to see all of Petra's live stream yesterday, but I think from what I gather, she did a pretty good job explaining a lot of that in her live stream. So if you're not familiar with Petra, she has a channel on YouTube called Tech Condo. So yeah. Lots of interesting topics over in Discord. Only been there a few days. I found it interesting and helpful. Yeah, it's a great place to be. I mean, it's you're able to ask questions and get opinions other than just mine, and you're very often able to get answers to things a lot faster than I can respond as well, because there's always somebody on there, always somebody online. Let's see. Okay, SDI input on the playback unit, so output 11 goes to, yeah, I have to make a new cable for that. The existing one's too short. So 11 that will go down to here. All right. Okay, so someone asking me, okay, well, I'll talk about the tools here. So some of these are not very, this is just a standard coax cutter and nothing special about it. It has curved blades to make sure that it doesn't compress the cables as much as a flat bladed one would. Nothing special there. You can get those at your local hardware store, no problem. Crimper, this is a generic crimp frame with a Greenlee 2549 crimp die. These, I've been made aware, are getting harder and harder to find. They still exist, but you can't get them at a lot of your more common retailers like Amazon any longer. The official Canary crimp die and tool is very expensive. You're talking over $200 for this. This cost me, I think, $30 for the entire thing. But the thing you have to watch out for, you just want to make sure that you've got the right size holes there for crimping your center pin and the outer sleeve. As long as you got the right size, you're fine. So I'm able to get away with kind of a generic one for that. The stripper, this is a Canary TS100U. These are a little spendy, but absolutely worth what they cost. I used to do the stripping these cables using generic stuff, and it was way more work, as I'd have to strip twice because the strip distances are very specific. So I'd have to strip once and then strip again with the right length for both the outer sleeve and for the center conductor, and it just took a long time. So finally I decided I'm just going to break down, get the real Canary one. I did. It's absolutely been worth it. Totally recommend it. So yeah, if you want to make your own cables, that's the way to go. So the process, I don't want to explain it very well, but you put the sleeve on the cable, strip the cable using the stripper, and you put a center pin on the center conductor of the cable, crimp that into place, put the connector on there, and as you're putting the connector on, you kind of wiggle it around so that this portion can get underneath the braid, this foil braid, it's not a foil braid, but get around underneath the braid, and then crimp that, and you're done. So that's all it takes to make a cable. And make them the exact length that you need. And these, I guarantee, are higher quality than pretty much anything that you can buy. Unless it's one of these. And there are companies that will make these for you, but they charge you out the nose for it. If you were making more than a handful of cables, it can be cheaper to just get your own tools and do it yourself. But as you can see, it's actually very fast. So. Going back to encoders, handling Starlink. I tested Starlink with an AWS Extra Elemental Link XD and it worked perfectly. That doesn't surprise me. Amazon has put a lot of effort into making that stuff work pretty well. So if that's what you're using, then yeah, it can work pretty well. So yeah. It's Neutrik for connectors and some are for cables common in the US. Neutrik are very common. Some is not. I use Neutrik a lot. In fact, a lot of the connectors in this panel are Neutrik. Yeah, my blades might be dull. This isn't cutting as readily as I'm used to. There we go. Good for hiring out the drywall work. Yeah, I mean. If I was 20 years younger, I would probably do the drywall stuff myself, but I'm 49, guys. I don't have the energy that I used to. I still probably have the strength I did when I was younger, but I don't have the energy I did when I was younger, that's for sure. I get tired a lot faster than I used to. Okay, which cable am I doing now? Hyperdeck recorder, yeah, input 13. That's a pretty short one. And another short one. I'm going to go just a bit longer than I did on the last one. That one was a little tighter than I like. So. I was getting about 20 to 25 megabit up on the Starlink connection. I have seen times when it will go that high on mine, but for the most part it tends to be 10 or 12 or less. And sometimes dipping down as low as like 1.5, which can be very frustrating. Did I put a sleeve on there? I don't think I did. Oh, I was working on this one, that's why. All right. Astro Roadie. My home setup is very different from my portable setup, which is also very different than what I use for clients. Use case is king. Absolutely, yeah. You have to, when you're buying equipment, you have to take into well, I mean, the basis of your decision really has to be how you're going to use it. You know, as I'm considering what equipment I'm going to use for my YouTube room in my basement, the needs there are going to be very different than the needs in my trailer. So I still haven't decided what all equipment I'm going to get for that. That's still kind of a decision-making process is still very much in play at the moment. So I'm leaning towards doing another ATEM, but I'm not 100% sure that's what I'm going to do. I could consider doing vMix this time around. I'm going to have a high-power PC down there anyway. So really, the only hardware cost I would have would be a capture card, which I probably would need again anyway. So we'll see. I don't have to do iMag in my own home, so I might end up doing a vMix setup in my house for that. We'll see. It's definitely on the table. And that was input 13. How many of you watching here today watched the live streams yesterday with other YouTubers? JHB, do you prefer the shallow depth of field to the full size? I prefer the shallow depth to the full size. I'm talking about the case, I'm sure. I prefer the shallow whenever I can get away with it, which these days is more and more. Like you're finding less and less equipment is full rack depth, like 18, 19 inches plus. That just doesn't seem to be very common any longer. But yeah, the shallow is pretty awesome. The jury is still out on how well this is going to handle heat, obviously. I hear that the new Constellations are generating a lot less heat, consuming a lot less power than the older ones. That's considering that I just got mine. I don't know that for sure yet. So we'll find out. Yeah, I'm a master. I don't know about that. Like I say, I'm still learning just like everybody else. I used to use the Canary BNCs, and I went to Neutrik rear twist connectors and never looked back again. I'm tempted by those as well. I mean, certainly it's a cool concept being able to insert and remove easily from the back. I have a few BNC insertion tools, and that makes these a little bit easier than they would be otherwise. But part of the reason I like these is they're inexpensive. Relatively inexpensive. You buy them 100 at a time like I do, and they're less than $2 a piece. Okay, which one am I doing next? Looks like I'm doing SDI input on the recorder. So Hyperdeck recorder output 12. And that's going to go down. I'll switch cameras here in a minute and let you guys see my progress so far. So about so long right there. Alright, yeah, a handful more cables than there was there earlier. Old as gold? What are you referring to there, Sharif? I had a bunch of meetings and couldn't catch I was talking about the live streams yesterday. I'm planning on watching the VODs here soon. Yeah, I think everybody left the videos up. I don't know why they wouldn't. So I actually had to re-upload mine because of the streaming issues, but I did have a high quality recording, and I had to. As soon as it was over, I started copying the files to a computer so I could cut and re-encode and upload. But I had my video up like about an hour after my stream ended. So. If a new Constellation 4K came out tomorrow, which version would you get for your trailer? Assuming specs match HD versions. I'm assuming a choice between 2 and 4 because of Supersource. That's kind of a tough call. Yeah, it would obviously be a choice between the 2 and 4 ME versions. But I could definitely get away with the 2ME. I mean, I've been using the 2ME switcher in my trailer all this time, and I've never run out of inputs on it. There's been times when it would have been nice to have an additional ME or two, but I've never needed more inputs than I've got. That said, though, I'm able to get away with only 20 because I have two 40 by 40 routing switchers in there, and that allows me to connect up a lot more sources than just 20. But having dual super source would be awesome. Having 4 MEs would be awesome. So if the price was right on the 40 input 4 ME, I would probably go that way, honestly. Yeah, so it sounds like people who ordered the 4 ME Constellation HD are not getting them yet. Apparently those are taking longer to ship than the 2 ME. I think they knew that 2 ME was going to be the most popular and got those out the door first. And we're seeing those show up all over the place. Like most of the people that were on stream day yesterday have the 2 MEs now. Of those who are getting them, I think I was the last to get it. I think pretty much everybody else has one. Aaron Parecki ordered the 4 ME. He hasn't got his yet. But I think everybody else has their 2 MEs. So. Hello from Australia. Do you use the TP-Link Omada controller for your network switch? And if so, what has been your experience? This one is an older model. It doesn't support the Omada stuff. I do have some stuff that does support Omada. I've never used it. Cloud configuration is not something that's been something I've ever really needed. So I've never spent much time pursuing that. Somebody asked me earlier if I was going to switch over to Ubiquity for some of my network stuff. I've been watching that, but at this point, if I'm going to do an upgrade on my network and my trailer, I'm going to go 10 gig Ethernet and PoE. And that means it's going to cost an absolute fortune. And considering I haven't had the need yet, I haven't done it. So, okay, what do I need to do next here? I can do the converters, HDMI. So rear HDMI in, that's input number 9. Let me go back to overhead here. Input number 9 over to here. So that'll be SDI output on there. Not so long right there. Another camera channel had his 2 ME for around 2 weeks, yeah. Some people are getting them earlier than others. Like, I ordered mine like pretty much right away. I got mine from B&H. And yeah, I placed the order. It wasn't quite the day it was announced, but only a couple days later. And I got the notification on Sunday that it was shipping. And darn FedEx, they said, delivered Tuesday. And then on Tuesday, said, nope, not delivered Tuesday, coming Thursday, and on Wednesday, and then wake up Wednesday morning. No, not coming Wednesday, gonna be Thursday. And then a little while later, I got another email, out for delivery. Oops, I forgot the sleeve on this one. So yeah, of course it required a signature, and it was gonna be delivered right around the time of my stream day stream. And it literally arrived 3 minutes before I went live. So, hopped out of my trailer, wearing my microphone and in-ear wireless and everything, to meet the FedEx driver at the door. And did you see the fan noise from the CHD2ME in the setup? Yeah. I'm hearing it's a lot better. So, and I did power mine on briefly, and the fan noise, I wasn't paying close attention to it, but the fan noise didn't seem egregious. So that's not right. That didn't strip right. Might need to use that cable for something else. I'm gonna need to cut that off and do it again. That didn't work. still got it there. All right, try again. Went with a Microtique for 10G trunks. They were a pain to configure, but great prices. That's what I've heard about those. I've also heard that they have some security issues, so it would make me a little bit leery about going with those. They haven't been super responsive to addressing security issues. You mentioned earlier PTZ camera. Which one do you have? Well, the one that I have is certainly not one that I'd recommend at this point. I use the Sony SRG 300 SEs. They are a really old model at this point, and image quality on them is not up to standard, modern day standards. So I'm going to keep grabbing an extra one of those. Not up to modern day standards. If I was going to buy one today, I would either save up for the Sony BRC X400 or maybe the BRC X1000. X1000 looks pretty amazing, and it would match my existing cameras perfectly because it's essentially the same thing. But if I needed to get something a little bit cheaper, I would go with the Sony SRG X120 for 12x zoom or the X300 for 30 times zoom. So I've used those cameras. They work pretty well, and it's a known quantity in terms of coming from Sony. Okay, so I'm doing HDMI in. That's input 9. That will come from SDI out over here. What is your take on zoom or focus demands from Blackmagic? Yay or nay? I think that the demands themselves are fine. I still have a big issue with those cameras. You know, when the cameras were announced, I put out a video on my channel talking about how the lenses that they suggest you use are garbage, and they absolutely are. I stand by that, and it seems like everybody else who's ever used them feels the same way. But in December, I rented one of those cameras for a week, played with it. I still need to edit that video. I played with it for about a week, ran a bunch of tests on it. And same time I rented the camera, I rented a super high quality, at least allegedly super high quality micro four thirds lens. And the performance was disappointing of the whole system. Got better image quality when I used, what's the brand? Metabones adapter to convert some Canon EF lenses. Those look way better than the native micro four thirds. But the camera itself still seems to have some image quality issues. I came away not impressed. But the zoom and focus demands themselves seem fine. I haven't tried one myself, but the people that have reviewed it, talked about it online, seem to like them. It's just the fact that their studio cameras are not great. I'll mention that when I was doing that testing, I set up the studio camera 4K Pro next to one of my Sony camcorders, the ones like I'm using here today, and the quality and image between the two was night and day. The Sonys were way, way, way better. It wasn't even close. The amount of detail in the images from the Sony was, well, it looked like the difference between 720p and 4K. So the Ursa broadcast I hear is a lot better. Well, I haven't used one yet. I sold off all my B4 lenses a few years ago, and I've never been tempted to replace them. And the Sony camcorders I got work fine for the type of events that I do, and so I've just never really been tempted to go with the Ursa broadcast route. But I hear good things about them. Where's this one go on? So this is HDMI out, output 6. All right, about that long. Which was the 30X? I assume you mean the PTZ. So the Sony, well, they have two models of PTZ that are mostly similar. The BRC and then the SRG series, and then both of them have the X300 is the model number. So it's either SRG for the lower end or BRC X300. And the cameras are pretty similar. The BRC has a lot more processing capabilities, so like you can really tweak your colors and exposure and things like that much more so. And I think the BRC version also does things like traces, so you can basically record a series of movements and play it back. I'm pretty sure that the lower end one doesn't do that. But otherwise, pretty similar. Okay. I have an amazing AV trailer, thank you. How do you use that on jobs? Park it outside, run cables inside for the cameras during an event? Do you only use it for outside events? Well, we use it for indoor events all the time, a lot more than we do outside events. So I have 2 fiber cables that I can run indoors. So one 150 meter and then one 200 meter. And if I need to, I can string those together. But yeah, I'll run that inside, set up a breakout box inside. That's where all the cameras plug in. It also brings in Ethernet, which, because I'm using Dante, also means that audio is coming over that as well. It works brilliantly. It's amazing. It cuts setup time down tremendously. So if you've been on many professional video jobs, you know it's kind of standard. You set up the day before and test everything. You can go through a fax, do all that one day before you go live the next day. With my trailer, I generally don't have to do that. For the most part, I can show up day of because all the equipment is already pre-wired and ready to go. And I usually take the time to program things in the trailer before I leave for an event too. So I show up on site and everything's just ready. So setup times are so much less than not having the trailer. Okay, output 6 is where this one's going. That was a little tighter than it should have been. It works, but a little tighter than I wanted. I found Ursa Broadcast version 1 for a steal. I think I'm getting. If it's in good shape, yeah, I wouldn't hesitate. I have 3 of the Studio Camera 4K Pro and a Broadcast Studio. They work great for me using Micro Four Thirds, but there is a lot of light in that space. I didn't find that low light was the problem with the 4K Pro. I mean, it definitely does better with more light, but the image just does not have a lot of detail. It's very soft compared to the other cameras that I tested against. So, astonishingly so. If I was on my other computer, I would show you some screen grabs that I got. But the difference between them is amazing. And it didn't matter what lens I put on it. I tried, so the lens that I rented was an Olympus 12-40 f2.8. It has the highest rating from DxO Mark in terms of sharpness and image quality of any of them that they've tested, any of the zooms. And then I also tested with using some EF lenses and Metabones adapter. The Canon lenses looked considerably better, but even with that, the image quality I saw coming out of the 4K Pro was considerably substandard compared to my Sonys. So. You have a different PoE switch for your Dante network. Well, when I'm using this panel or this FlyPack, this is my switch that I use. It provides my Dante as well as everything else. When I'm doing productions using my trailer, I have a different switch that I use for that. That's a 24 port switch, 24 plus 4 because it's got 4 fiber SFPs on it. And I have a series of ports on there configured to be part of my Dante VLAN. And so I just plug Dante stuff into that. And that includes both production audio as well as as intercom. So, alrighty, so I might be getting to the point where I need to start working on this guy. What am I lacking? So I've got HDMI converter in there. Oh, I need to do a couple for routing the multi-views. So I'm going to route the multi-views back into a couple of inputs. So I'm going to have those go to inputs 19 and 20. So I need to do cables for those real quick. All right. I'm actually caught up on questions. That's crazy. That never happens in a live stream. Okay, in terms of matching Blackmagic cameras, if you have some of their recent cameras, it's a little easier, but if you've got any of their older cameras in the mix, good luck. They changed color sciences and changed sensors so much. Like the early Ursa cameras, trying to match any two of those was nearly impossible. The 4.6Ks were very magenta, the 4K was very green, and no matter what you did to tweak the color settings internally, they never matched. Newer ones are better, but there's still differences across models. So yeah, I would not mix and match if you had a choice. Use Canary L2.5 CHD cable internally. What would you recommend for outside the pack running off of the cameras? Something thick and rugged from Canary that can be put. I don't know model numbers off the top of my head, but yes, essentially that. And probably something more flexible too. It's one of the things you want with cables. Cables that you're going to be dealing with on a regular basis. You want flexible versions. So like. In this case, this is built-in 1505A. They have a 1505F, which is a lot more flexible, and that's more ideal for that. Okay, so I need to go multi-view over there. Okay, so about so long. Yeah, when you say mobile coax, I assume you mean the flexible stuff. Yeah, and that's what that's designed for. So this stuff is it's a little bit less flexible. It's a little more rigid, and it's designed for permanent installs. Normally, this stuff is actually used for running in wall or whatever, like in building, but it works really well for this kind of thing too. And this is what I have throughout my trailer. I have the 1505A throughout my entire trailer. 3 1,000-foot spools of it in the trailer. We just got our Constellation 2ME and Ethernet port for comm is new to me. What is that about? Okay, so that is actually for interfacing with another comm system. That connection, even though it's on an RJ45, is actually just line level audio, like you plug into a mixer. And they just happen to put it on an RJ45 connector instead of something else. So that connection is what we refer to as a 4-wire. And when I say 4-wire, it's 2 wires for audio input and 2 wires for audio output. So any comm system that has 4-wire capability can be interfaced with these switchers. That includes a whole wide variety. So like ClearComm has 4-wire interfaces, RTS has 4-wire interfaces, my Holyland systems have 4-wire interfaces. You can use 4-wire to go to and from an audio mixer because it is just line level audio, so you don't have anything special going on there. But it's not a native intercom signal in and of itself. It's just audio. Nothing fancy there. So you would still need a separate intercom system for that. Now that said, this FlyPack that I'm building here right now actually does have intercom as part of my studio converter. So when I get it hooked up, I'll show you guys how that works. The switcher itself actually has some intercom capabilities built into it as well, but you have to use Blackmagic cameras to take advantage of it. So if you're not using Blackmagic cameras, it's not of much value to you. And really all that the switcher is doing is merging the audio from multiple different sources. So it's not doing anything terribly sophisticated with it. Do I have any experience with bird dog gear? I started out with the whole system on NDI and vMix, switching over to SDI now, as I always had random drop frames and such. My 2ME is coming tomorrow. I don't personally have any experience with bird dog stuff. I've interacted with a lot of people who have, and for simple setups, the NDI bird dog stuff can work well, but they don't scale very well. I keep hearing that over and over and over again. So works great if you have just a handful, just a couple of cameras or whatever. But when you start to scale it out more than that, things sort of start to fall apart. And that's one of the reasons I've never really gotten into NDI. SDI is a lot more reliable. It's designed with broadcast in mind. So again, I need to do a video on NDI at some point, but I don't necessarily feel super qualified to do so because I've never used it myself. Everything I know about NDI comes from talking to other people who have used it. So I've kind of avoided the topic because of that. Yeah, another camera channel saying wired up the TalkBack RJ45 to the XR18. Yep, that's kind of what they designed. That's what they want you to do with it, like interfacing with other equipment. So Blackmagic intercom stuff is passable in a lot of cases, but kind of lacking. So they seem to be trying to improve. And as we talked about earlier on the stream, it seems that there are some rumors out there that they might actually be trying to come up with their own products. I have no knowledge about that at all. So, as many relationships as I've developed with people inside of Blackmagic over the years, I intentionally do not ask and do not volunteer to receive inside information, nor do I think they typically share that stuff with outsiders anyway. So it's one of those, if I don't ask, then I can't be held accountable for knowing. So I don't ask. Pretty noob question. Is there a difference between coax cable and what's used for HD SDI? I keep thinking these people using coax or cable for HD SDI. Okay, so well, coax cable is a generic term. It just refers to a cable that has a center conductor and then a shield on the outside or a sleeve on the outside or whatever. The thing you got to watch out for when you're doing video work is you want to make sure that you're using 75 ohm cable. And fortunately, that's pretty common. So the stuff you get at your local hardware store for running cable TV lines through your house, that's 75 ohm cable. And you absolutely can use that for doing professional video production. It absolutely can work. The thing you run into is it's not quite as high a quality as something like this. And so if you're running high resolution, like 4K or even 1080 at 50 or 60 frames per second, you might find that the amount of distance that you get out of your hardware store cable might be limited. But your mileage may vary. There are some higher quality cables available, and you can't even necessarily guarantee that you buy the same model number from one manufacturer from one day to the next that you're getting the exact same thing. So, you know, they're building to a different spec than what we use in professional video. So, you know, typically with broadcast or with cable type connections, did I forget a thing again? I did. With cable type connections, they have to go not much higher than 1 gigahertz with their signals. HD video, so 720p or 1080 at up to 30 frames per second or 60 fields per second interlaced. The bandwidth on that is about 1.5 gigahertz. If you go up to 1080p at 50 or 60 frames per second, that is about 6 gigahertz. And then 4K, sorry, that's 3 gigahertz. And then 4K at 30 frames per second is 6 gigahertz, and then 4K at 60 frames per second is 12 gigahertz. And so if you're trying to use that hardware store cable, what did I do here? Trying to use that hardware store cable for 6 gigahertz signals, you find that your range is going to be limited. It'll work at short range, but it will also die off a lot faster than purpose-made cable. So that said, though, the stuff you get at the hardware store is typically RG6, which is considerably thicker than this, which is based on RG59. And that does give you some additional reach with your cables that you don't necessarily get with the 59. So basically your mileage may vary. You might find that it works great. You may find that it's problematic. The bigger problem you run into, though, is that the hardware store cables, the connectors are nowhere near as high quality as what you get with something like this. These canary connectors are designed for high frequencies and they work really well. And the cheaper ones made for like cable TV are not. They're not designed to handle those high frequencies at all. So you may find that it might not work reliably. So if you want reliability, spring for the extra, get the real thing. But if you're on an extreme budget and you're not doing long runs, you can get away with the hardware store stuff and it'll work. So similar in concept. I've been running a TriCaster TC1 with Bird Dog's NDI, has been great. Yeah. So and I hear that kind of thing a lot. Like there are a lot of people out there who have had good experience with NDI. So it can't entirely be discounted. But at the same time, I have heard many tales of it falling apart when you try to scale it. All right, what connection do I need to do next here? Got inputs and outputs on the Hyperdeck. I need to do an input on the studio converter. That's output number 1. So I'll do that one real quick. And it goes down to here. Okay. That needs to be about, get a little extra, about that long. Joaquin says, I worked in an event and I had the Blackmagic fiber backs for the Ursa broadcast in the truck. We had so many problems with them. That's interesting because that's based on SMPTE fiber, which is usually pretty reliable. Maybe they got some less expensive cable or something. I don't know. But yeah, the other thing you got to watch out for is like a lot of people don't know how to take care of fiber cables. You have to treat them differently than you do copper. And a lot of crews haven't learned that yet. And so those cables tend to get abused. They don't do anything to protect the ends and tend to get damaged. You know, I have to replace my fiber ends with some regularity, or my fiber cables with some regularity, because I can't, no matter what I do, I cannot get my crews to treat them gingerly. I've tried and tried and tried, and just not had any luck. All right. Would the Video Hub be a standard monitoring solution for IP video 12G by Blackmagic? Any thoughts on how it would be better analyze the SD IP network? Sure. You know, it's just a signal router. Nothing super fancy about it. So yeah, I mean, if it meets your needs, go for it. Someday IP might take over, but I think it's still going to be a while. Like we don't have enough bandwidth on our current networks to handle more than a few cameras, which is kind of a problem. It's being used heavily for things like the Olympics. That's all IP based. All right, program in. That comes from output 1. I also didn't take into consider how expensive SMPTE fiber would be. Yeah, SMPTE fiber starts at about $14 or $15 a foot. So it gets really expensive really fast. The fibers that I use, even I get the armored version, so they're actually more expensive than the cheaper stuff. I pay about $1 per meter. So a 20 meter cable, about 20 bucks. Way, way cheaper. It's actually cheaper than copper when by the time you factor in putting ends on things and whatnot. And consider that it's bidirectional. So. All right, how about the heat control on this rack? That's an unknown quantity. So So I've got the Constellation, which is obviously going to produce some heat, and I have a couple of Hyperdecks which produce a little bit. The studio converter doesn't produce any heat at all. The monitor doesn't produce much. So I'm going to do some testing on this and kind of see how it fares. My television studio in here never had a problem. It always worked just fine, and I'm kind of anticipating that this will be just as good. I'm hearing from people who have these new Constellations that they run cooler and they use less power. So let's hope that that's actually the case. If it's a problem, then I'll reconfigure. But I didn't mention this earlier, but I made sure to put the Constellation on top of the stack here, so it doesn't have, so it's not producing heat that's going to affect anything else. I may find that I need to reconfigure that later, but for right now, that's what I'm going with. The problem was with the back. Interesting. Yeah. My camera guys tend to scrunch on my SDI cables at the end of the night in a hurry because they want to get home. It drives me insane. Yeah, scrunch up. Yeah, it's a problem, and I don't know how you solve that. So, but yeah, using inexpensive fibers does make it a little easier. Like, you know, if someone damages the fiber, $20 to replace it. It's not a big deal. Okay, what do I need to do next? What have I got left? Looks like I can start working on this rack, actually. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 SDIs, 2 HDMIs, 4 fibers, and then audio I've already done. I'll show you guys what I did on this audio here. So combo jacks, they accept both XLR or TRS, either one. What I did on the back is I actually wired them in parallel, so it's the same signals. So TRS and XLR are connected to each other, so I can plug in either one, and they both come as outputs onto TRS. So I can plug the TRS into the back of the switcher, and then I have inputs for either one. One thing that's nice about newer Blackmagic switchers is you can split up your channels. So even though it's a stereo input, you can actually split that into 2 mono. So if somebody brings me, which is very common, brings me a mono audio feed, I'll just plug it into the left and then split it in the software, and then that'll assign it to both the left and right outputs. So, what is the total cost of a rack like this? Are you adding SDI to HDMI converters for HDMI IOs? Okay, so let's talk about cost. The rack itself, when I bought it, it was $60. These days it's closer to 200. The monitors, 500, so we're 700. The Constellation HD, 1700, so 2400. I've got $700 Hyperdeck Studio Mini, so that's 3100 basically. Another 500 for the Hyperdeck Studio Mini HD, so 3600. And then the studio converter sells for, I think, 2000. So yeah, we're looking roughly 6,000-ish in that ballpark. And answer the other question, I'd have a single converter in here, bidirectional converter, which will take one of the SDI inputs and one of the SDI outputs and convert to and from HDMI, which I have on connectors here on the back. I don't generally do much with HDMI at the rack. I might have to plug in a laptop, but for the most part, if I'm plugging in HDMI from a laptop or something like that, it's somewhere else. You know, for example, if I'm doing a business conference, someone will have a laptop somewhere set up, and so I'll run fiber there and then convert from fiber to and from HDMI. So I don't have much need for HDMI here in this particular rack. All right, well, looks like it's probably time to start working on that. So go ahead and plug in the audio. One of the engineers for the OKC Dodger was telling me a while ago that the guy who designed the system there was using fiber cable on long runs to connect cameras to the system. Yeah, if you need to do a run longer than 100 meters or so, fiber is really your only option. copper doesn't work at those distances, no matter what signal type you're doing. Even SDI will break down. So, another camera channel. I hate that they offset the screen by having the menu set and lock buttons on the far right. If they just put those three buttons on the other side, align with other products. Yeah, true. It is a little different than the others, but we've been dealing with that for forever. You know, my 2ME Production Studio 4K, its screen is in a very different position than my smart video hubs. So yeah, you get screens in various positions as you go down the rack. Alrighty, okay, time to start wiring up these guys. So input 5, that will go obviously to input 5, so that's not a super long run. I'll call it about something like that. I need to set this computer to not go to sleep. Let me do that. Power. Actually, it's probably in the, I think it's in the display settings. Maybe not. This is Windows 11. I'm not used to it yet. Power, sleep, and battery settings. There we go. Screen and sleep. When battery power unseen. Plugged in, turn off the screen after 1 hour. There we go. Okay. I have a few systems I'm designing which are 12G SDI and NDI systems with 12G switchers, routers, multi-V systems, and vMix or TriCaster. These jobs become fairly complex. Well, any video system is complex, and the fact that it's 12G isn't really adding too much to it, other than the fact that you've got to get higher end equipment and higher end cables and everything. And your signal runs, you know, you might have to upgrade from copper to fiber for sooner than you would with like HD. So, can't wait to build one of those for the studios. Greetings from Argentina. Hello. Yeah, so these are fun. These are awesome. It's great to have these FlyPacks. What are your thoughts on Newtek's TriCaster? I used the old video toaster back in the day and was ahead of its time. If you want to rewind the stream about 30 minutes where I talked about hardware versus software switchers, TriCasters, you get a lot of functionality. You get an awful lot of functionality in a relatively small piece of equipment. If you're just doing live streaming or recording, then they work great. But if you need to do IMAG, the additional latency that's added by any computer-based switcher can be a problem. So it depends on what you're doing with it. You know, I do a lot of IMAG, so hardware switchers are really the only viable option for me. I like the functionality that you get with a lot of those things. You know, especially when you can bring in cameras over NDI, and if you're doing Zoom calls, that's a great option. But then you bring a projector inside of a venue into the equation. Everything changes. That additional latency that's added by a TriCaster can be a deal breaker. It's not because the 2 frames of latency that are created by it itself, it's just the additional, just all the devices in the chain are adding some latency. So, you know, a typical camera, a high-end camera might have less than a frame of latency on the output. More typically, you're probably going to find 1 to 2 frames. Why did that not work? Yeah, and that will be enough to. And then you also have like 4 or 5 frames on most projectors. So, you know, a couple frames from the camera, 4 or 5 frames from the projector, a couple of frames from. Man, I really bunged that up. Yeah, from your switcher, it adds up, and I think it's at the point where your signal on your projector is delayed by so much that people start to notice it. Are you adding a web presenter? No, I am not. I kind of discussed this at length early in the stream, but basically, they're not reliable enough. and they also don't support bonding, which is something that I really need to have. And so I am going to continue using my Hyperdeck Video Pro I've used in the past. All right, Digital Emotion asking, what cameras do I use? So I have settled on Sony camcorders for most events. To the point where I now have 6 of them. The majority of my cameras that I use, especially the ones that I use the most, are the the Sony PSW Z150s. It's a 1-inch camcorder, so it has a 1-inch sensor in it, or 1.inch type. It's not really 1-inch diagonal, which for a camcorder is absolutely enormous. Most camcorders have what they call a 1/3 or 1/3 inch, 1/3 type. So essentially what happens is my cameras have a sensor that's essentially 9 times larger than you get with a typical camcorder. So they're able to gather a lot more light, they're able to give a shallow or depth of field you typically get. So the sensor, it's smaller than Micro Four Thirds, but not by a lot. But it produces a nice high quality image. The other reason I went with those versus like a studio camera or something like that is the zoom range. So these cameras, 12 times optical, and then they have something called clear image zoom, which doubles that range in HD, or 1.5 times in 4K without loss of resolution. The sensor on those cameras is 20 megapixel. So even when you're shooting in 4K, which is 8 megapixel, you can crop in on the sensor and not lose any detail. So that's effectively what they're doing. And I found that clear image zoom works spectacularly well. The bottom line is, out of a small camcorder, I'm getting pretty high quality image that works well in low light, and it gives me 24 times zoom in HD or 18 times zoom in 4K, which is a lot. And it's really hard to match that with any other solution. If you're doing events where you're outdoors or you have to set up cameras in the back of the room, having a long zoom reach like that really makes a huge difference. There are definitely cameras out there that have higher quality image. There's no debate about that. But that said, the bang for the buck is amazing. So I've tried other cameras, and I keep coming back to these Sonys. So. All right, G-Roll, can you give a brief take on salvo routing? All right, so salvo routing is, okay, let's back up just a bit. We'll talk about video routers in general. It's one of those things I kind of assumed people would sort of know about video, but it turns out that's not necessarily true. A video routing switcher is a device which allows you to connect up any video sources, so your cameras, your switchers, your video recorders, computers, you name it, anything, and then be able to route those to any destination. So you hook up your inputs on your switcher to the outputs on your routing switcher, whatever. The advantage is you're able to change how your signals are routed without having to physically move any cables. So you just press some buttons or click some buttons in software, whatever, and reroute signals. And the other nice thing about it is you're able to send any one signal to any number of destinations. So if you want to have your program output of your switcher go to a dozen different displays, you can do that. You don't have to get a separate distribution. Salvo routing, he was asking about there, is the ability to route a whole bunch of different sources all at once. So say you've got a type of event that you do video for regularly, and you route signals a certain way, you can record what those routes are, and then when it comes time to recall them, you can do it all at once. So you don't have to say, do this route, and then do this route, and then do this route. It's more like, these are the routes that I need, go. And so it does all of them at the same time. So that's what salvo routing is. Salvo routing is just basically the ability to do multiple routes, to change multiple routes as one operation. So in one step. So that's all that really means. Okay. Work with some schools that had some TriCasters, recommended the Ross graphite to them, and problems went away. Yeah, the Ross switchers are amazing. If someone's got the budget for those, you're not going to go wrong with one of those things. I have heard a fair number of horror stories with TriCasters and other software-based switchers. The fact that it's software adds a lot of additional complexity. In most cases, they're running Windows, so you got to deal with all the potential issues of Windows updates and those not working or installing at the time when you don't want them to, or a driver update breaking something. You got all the complexity of a computer plus this complexity of the software that's running your switching system. So, yeah, with more complexity comes more opportunities for things to break. So something to keep in mind. Alrighty. Curious about what musical keyboard that is on the back of the room. That is a Yamaha Clavinova CVP 207. I bought that in January of 2003, so it's an older unit, but they haven't really improved them that much since then, so I've never upgraded it. But the funny thing about me having that is that I do not play piano. I bought that for, well, I was going to try and learn. And the piano even came with a year of lessons that I never took advantage of. But I bought it mostly because I was very actively running a recording studio in my home at the time, and I needed something for that. Rather than getting a grand piano at huge cost, I went with a high-quality Yamaha digital piano. And on recording, you can't really tell the difference between this and a grand piano, unless you have a really good set of ears, and then you can hear the difference, but the difference is very subtle. The sounds for this were recorded off of Yamaha's nicest piano, and they went to a lot of lengths to make sure that it sounded like a real piano. They emulate things like string resonances and separate recordings for when you let off the keys. They have the sound of the damping mechanism. They have the sound of the sustain mechanism in there. Now, software has since caught up. Software-based pianos have since caught up. But the time I got that, there was nothing else like it on the market. What's my take on live view for bonding? Live view works great. So, it's something you're looking into, then yeah, great option. No hesitation to recommend it. I don't use it personally because it would actually cost me a lot more than the Hyperdeck stuff I'm using. So, yeah, but it works really well. I hear from so many people who have used it and love it. I don't think I've ever heard anybody complain about live view stuff. That's one of the biggest advantages I've had from having this YouTube channel, getting feedback from people. So I know that a lot of people benefit from me having this channel and sharing knowledge, but I benefit just as much because I hear from other people and I hear about what works well and what doesn't work well. So it gives me an interesting perspective that I never would have had I not started a YouTube channel. And I know I've mentioned this before, but anybody who knows me personally would never suspect that I would ever do this, because I am very much not a person who likes attention. I do not like being the center of attention at all. And the idea of being on camera, I wouldn't necessarily say it scares me, but it doesn't appeal to me. I'm sure that's pretty common with a lot of people who watch the channel. It's like you'd rather be behind the camera instead of in front of it. I am so that way. And the fact that I have a YouTube channel is just one of those things like, seriously? Doug? So, here we are. I never really set out to do it, it just sort of happened. Alright, someone asking what Hyperdeck Video I'm using. In this rack, I'm using the older Video Pro. That camera's live. I have the Video Go in my trailer, and then I have a Video X that I purchased a couple months ago. I'm going to stay with the VideoU Pro, as it does some things better than the VideoX does, actually. So, yeah, so it's even though it's an older unit, it's more feature packed than the new one. So, I mean, I absolutely could put the VideoX in here, but the VideoX doesn't have a battery. This one does. So, you know, I can turn this one on, it'll boot without having power connected, which is nice. Making sure that if you have a cable come loose, that it doesn't just shut off on you. And this also lets you tether up to 4 phones with it, whereas the VideoX only does 1. So, in an extreme circumstance where I have really low bandwidth at a venue, being able to tether multiple phones is nice. There's been an obsession with larger sensors and cinema cameras, and this has been enhanced by mirrorless day also. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and someone else mentioned there, I didn't notice who, but someone also mentioned that broadcast cameras don't have large sensors. That is true. Broadcast cameras tend to have a 2/3 inch sensor, so even smaller than the Sony cameras that I'm using. There's actually a reason for that, and that has to do with focusing. The bigger your sensor, the more likely you are to have shallow adaptive field, which is great if you're shooting cinema and you want to have that cinema look. Not so great if you got a camera operator who's trying to maintain focus on a moving subject, or you got a moving camera. And so the 2/3 inch size is kind of somewhat a compromise between the two. So it gives you the ability to have keep nice sharp focus all the time, making it easier on the camera operator to maintain focus, but large enough to gather enough light that it's going to look decent in low light situations. So that's how the 2/3 came about, and it's still considered kind of the gold standard for anybody that's doing live work. And I can tell you from experience that trying to do live video productions on a camera with a large sensor and a large aperture is frustrating. I got hired to shoot some fitness videos right. I couldn't hear me there for a second. So right when COVID hit, I got hired to shoot some fitness videos, and I was put on a Canon C200 or 300, maybe it was a 300, with a 70 to 200 millimeter f2.8 lens, and the director asked me to shoot it wide open at f2.8. Can you imagine what that was like? Trying to maintain critical focus on a subject that's jumping around when their depth of field is literally measured in centimeters or less. It was a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. And so, you know, I think people don't take that into consideration. Like, yes, the shallow depth of field look can be very pleasing, but in a live situation where you don't know where your subject is going to be at any given time, that shallow depth of field is a real hindrance. So when people ask me about using DSLRs for live, I try to steer them away from it, because if you're dealing with a situation where you got a moving subject, it's going to be next to impossible to get focus, critical focus. Do I build custom racks for people? How can I get a contract for one? I don't. It's just not something I'm terribly interested in doing. I do it for myself, but not something I want to get involved in doing for others. So there's not a lot to it. I mean, the hardest part about this is really making these cables, and that's something you can learn pretty fast. And spend a little money. You spend less on the tools than you would spend on labor of having somebody else do it. Carlos says he has brother has the same Yamaha keyboard. Cool. Yeah, there are a lot of Clavinovas that look the same, so it's entirely possible it's a different one. But yeah, the Clavinovas are very popular for digital pianos. I've been very happy with mine. Joaquin says he's had issues with LiveView Solo, but the contribution coders like the LiveView 300 and up are excellent. So, interesting. Yeah, I think you're the first person who's ever had anything less than stellar to say about the LiveView Solo. I know the LU300 series are very popular for companies that need to bring in remote video. They work really well for that. What do I think of Restream? It's fine. Yeah, I don't use it personally, but it's fine for what it is. If I need to get a signal out to multiple locations, I just stream it to multiple locations using my ShareLink account. So, nice and easy. Yeah, as mentioned, several people mentioned in the chat, the 2/3 jet sensor make it way easier to do a zoom. So you can get a smaller lens that will zoom in a lot farther than you can with the larger sensor. So for live use, the smaller sensor is in a lot of ways advantageous. Eric saying I'm about 2/3 done. And that's probably about right. Got most of the. Got a lot of the connections made. Just have a handful left, and then do some testing. And so, yeah. I hope nobody came here assuming today that this is going to be a quick stream, because this is not exactly a quick process. If I already had the cables made, that would be one thing. But you can't pre-make the cables because you don't know how long they need to be, unless you want to make them intentionally too long. So, trying to avoid that. Alrighty, so next one I need to run output 1, which is actually not output 1, is it? It's output 2. I labeled those wrong. I might produce a new label later. Alright, so that one needs to be about so long. DSLRs having non-parfocal lenses and lenses without servos is also not ideal for live OBs. Oh, not at all. Yeah, I mean, photography lenses are not great for that by any stretch of the imagination. But there are a lot of people that insist on using them. Even yesterday with Photo Joseph's live stream, we're talking about camera choices. He was only talking about DSLR style or mirrorless version, which I thought was interesting because people who really work in live, they don't use those. That's not what they use at all. That'd be like, I have no other option. I'll use one, but for the most part, yeah. I see you wearing an Apple Watch. Is there any broadcast video related apps you'd recommend? I've never really looked into that much, honestly. I use an iPhone mostly because I wanted something that I just don't have to mess with, and just works. I'm not necessarily the biggest Apple fan in the world. Oops, I already had one there. In terms of apps for this sort of thing, if you want an app for controlling ATEM stuff, take a look at Adam Tao's Mix Effect. It's amazing. It's awesome. He charges $50 for the Pro version, worth every penny. So if you want to be able to control your ATEM from an iOS device, that is an awesome choice. Okay. Power cables are getting a little tight in here. Adam Tao is a super nice guy too. He's in a Zoom meeting that I have with some other software creators once a month. Super nice guy. Does this rack have threaded holes or replaceable nuts? Any issues with damaging threaded holes getting damaged? This one, I mean, technically there is a rail behind that has the threads in it. It's not part of the main case, so that could be replaced. I've been using Gator cases for 20 years. I've never had to do that. So I don't know if I'm just extra careful or I'm not removing and adding stuff as often as others do. But that's just never been a problem for me. So, yeah. How did you become a video production guy? Where did you start? Well, we can go back to when I was a teenager in the 80s. And actually even further back than that. I've always been interested in AV stuff. And that goes back to the time when I was a little kid. So even when I was like 4 years old, I obviously had an interest in audio and video, even that young. And before it was really accessible by consumers. This is in the 70s. And then as the 80s came around and we started to see video equipment become available to consumers. I was young and young enough that I didn't have a way of earning much by the way of income, and there's no way I could afford video cameras of the day, and they were terrible anyway. But I always had an interest in them, and like the opportunities that I had to borrow one from somebody, like get one from at school or whatever, I would always do that. And it was something that always fascinated me, and like even before it was common for people to have multiple VCRs, I acquired a second VCR, then I'd use my family's VCR and I'd edit videos, things like that. Just always had a fascination with it. And then into the 90s, when decent quality cameras actually did start to become available, I invested in my first real camera in late 90s, or maybe it was more like 2000. I got a Panasonic 3-chip camera, and shooting videos all the time. And any excuse I would have to put together a live production, I did. And I didn't have a lot of money. I'm still young, and I would invest in whatever equipment I could. You know, for example, my very first video switcher was only had 2 inputs, and you'd switch back and forth between the 2. But I made the best of that. You know, I took that and combined that with some switchers, like switches, not switchers, but switches that let you select inputs, like various video sources to go into that switcher. So I was able to switch multiple cameras even on a 2-input switcher, and just kind of grew from there. And early 2000s, I was finally able to get real cameras, and I actually bought some of the first HD cameras that were affordable. The Sony FX1. I bought a couple of those. Like before they even came to the U.S., I ordered them out of Japan. I got models, serial numbers 32 and 35. I remember that. Well before anybody else had them. And yeah, I wasn't able to switch in HD, but those cameras had SD outputs, and I'd switch in HD and record in HD. Switch in SD, record in HD, and then be able to do a new cut later, have an HD version of something, long before consumers were doing HD. And it just has grown ever since then. So realistically, I've been doing, and besides that, I was shooting wedding videos and things like that from the 90s. I've never been a big fan of editing. Even today, I don't care for editing much. And live video kind of appeals to me in that way, because like you don't have to do any editing. Anyway, yeah, just over time, interest has grown, and the amount of gear that I've had has grown, and then go into a little more detail. from 2007 to 2016, I was working on software to run Little Caesars stores. And even to this day, if you walk into a Little Caesars store, all the software that's running at the front counter and in the back of house for employees and all like that, that's still my software, even though I haven't been available. I've been involved in that for over 6 years now. But that project demanded a ton of my time. We were a small startup, didn't have much income, so we were having to do everything. Where all of us were having to wear multiple hats, working a crazy number of hours. Through that 9 years of my life, I was getting maybe 4 hours of sleep a night, and I didn't have a lot of time for hobbies. So I mean, I was still doing video stuff when I could, but I just didn't have the time to really get involved in that. And then when I quit there in 2016, well, actually, even before I quit, I knew I was going to be quitting. I decided 6 months before I turned in my notice that I was going to be quitting, just because I was tired of the hours and the total lack of respect that the company management showed to not, well, they treated me better than most, but most of the employees were treated terribly by their CTO, and I was just tired of it. And so I knew I was going to be quitting, and I started renewing and building up my collection of video equipment again. And that's actually when I started my YouTube channel. As I was researching and learning about the changes that had happened in the market in the last handful of years that had happened since I had been involved, I found that there weren't very many people producing videos about that stuff. And so I made a couple of videos talking about my findings with some of the stuff that I had purchased, and it seemed to have found an audience. And so here we are. But in terms of doing things for clients, that just sort of happened naturally. And when word kind of got out that I was doing that sort of thing, and somebody knew somebody who knew me, and yeah, like people would call me and say, hey, I've got this event coming up, I need somebody to record it, and take those jobs on. And I loved it, you know. It wasn't work to me, it was play to me. So whenever those opportunities came up, I'd jump on it. And to the point where in 2016, when I was really trying to get things going again, and I knew I was going to have more time and I wanted to make that part of my income, a lot of the jobs that I was doing for free just to help get my crew trained in doing live works. Like a lot of my crew, including Paul, that you guys seem to know on the channel fairly well, work in film. And there's a lot of overlap there, but there's also a lot of differences. And especially when you're talking about like live stuff, you know, live switching. You know, with live stuff, you don't get an opportunity to redo something. You have to act on your feet. You have to do everything on the fly. And so for close to a year, we were doing these events for an organization that did concerts weekly. We were doing them essentially for free, and just iMag. And we weren't streaming. The streaming wasn't really something that was in the public eye at that point, as much as it is now. But yeah, we would stream we shoot them for free, just through iMag, record it for review purposes and to give to them for keepsakes. But we did it for free, just to get the crew trained up. And so anyway, but yeah, doing that brought an awful lot of work because people saw what we were capable of doing, and say, hey, who are the guys that were doing the video for such and such a concert? And the people who were in charge of that would call us up and say, hey, we got a job for you. So yeah. Okay. Video Jam, are you using PTZ cameras anymore? I use them occasionally, but I've really cut down on them quite a bit because the quality on my PTZ cameras just isn't there. They work fine outdoors, but for indoor, the low light capability is just not great. And I don't like having such a jarring transition from one camera to the next, going from my Sony camcorders to those, because it is a huge difference. So yeah, so I mean I still use them, but not as much as I used to. I also find that having a PTZ doesn't really save on labor as compared to having a dedicated camera operator. So a lot of cases it just makes more sense to throw a camera operator in the mix anyway. So that's kind of what I've done. All right, this might be the last SDI. I've been using camcorders and video cameras instead of DSLR, maybe 1 or 2 DSLRs for interviews. Yeah, if you are shooting in a situation where your subject isn't moving, you're in control of lighting, then you can get amazing video out of DSLRs. So I don't mean to diss on DSLRs, but they tend to not be great options for live streaming. All right. Mix effect is awesome with Stream Deck integration. Yeah. So those two play nicely together as well. Big downside of low-budget cinema cameras is they are HDMI, which is not ideal for long-term durability. Not only that, a lot of them are not full-size HDMI, but micro or mini HDMI. And oh man, talk about delicate connectors, and which are just not ruggedized by any stretch of the imagination. So, yeah, SDI is the way to go when you can. You prefer soft cases or Pelican soft cases for transporting and storing cameras? I do hard cases. I use Pelican cases for all my cameras. You just know that it's going to be protected. All right, HDMI out goes to over here. Oh, that's upside down. I'm using some El Cheapo HDMI cables here. I hope they work out all right. Anthony asking, what I use for comms and tele? I've not seen you check it out. If you've not seen it, check out Telearbiter. I've looked at it, and I've contacted the company that makes it and asked them for review units, and they keep saying, yeah, we'll send you one, and then nothing ever happens. I'm tempted to buy one, or buy the setup to try it out. But, I mean, okay, I have a whole video on my channel about my comms, so I won't go into detail about that here. But my comms for my trailer is based on Dante, and then for this setup, the comms comes from my studio converters, my studio converter here, and the Blackmagic camera converter. So I just get it essentially for free with other functionality. So pretty amazing. All right, so it looks like I've just got. What do I have left here? So I need to do power on the studio converter. I need to do my fiber cables. But that should be, I think, everything. At that point, oh, I need to do video as well. So I need to do HDMI for that. Yeah. How has the upgraded solar on the mobile studio been working out? Well, it provides additional power sometimes. Big problem is with solar, you only generate power when you're charging the batteries or you have devices that are consuming the power that you're using. And most of the time, my trailer just isn't using the power that's available with solar. So a good part of the day, the solar panels aren't doing much. But when I need that solar, it's there, it's available. It's been nice to have. At the same time, I should also mention that putting solar panels on the trailer is not a financial decision in the least. They will never pay themselves off. I don't care how long I keep them on there, they will never pay themselves off. I just don't consume enough power coming off of solar to offset the cost of electricity that they save. So, so it's a nice bonus, but honestly, the main reason I got the solar panels on there was to make sure that the trailer had continuous power for the security and network systems. So if I have it parked somewhere away from a source of power, the solar will keep it running basically indefinitely. So that was the main reason. And that has worked really well. A few months ago, my trailer was actually damaged. The ski jumping competition that we shot, I did video about for my members and Patreon supporters. I'll go into the detail about that. My trailer was damaged by a snowcat that was towing the trailer out of the parking lot where we had it set up. And I had to have part of the front replaced. And I took the trailer to the manufacturer of the trailer, and I had to leave it there for a week, but it was fine. The solar panels kept everything running for that week, and so I had access to all the cameras, I had access to all the rest of the security system. So yeah, that was the main reason. So. All right. And any other cost comparable option to the Video Go you may have tested, such as horrible experience with one? I had a horrible experience with one in customer service. Well, I mean, the other option in that segment of the market is the YView Solo. So yeah, and great product. And I have no hesitation recommending it whatsoever. The main reason I haven't gone with it is because I have multiple devices, and the monthly cost on the Hyperdeck stuff is considerably lower. So, what's a job you've done that you're most proud of, and the most famous thing that we'd know about? That's tough to say. We've done a number of high-profile things. But when I say high-profile, it's relatively speaking. I mean, I haven't done anything that's gone onto national broadcast television. I've done some stuff that's gone onto local broadcast television. Handful of times, but I've never done anything that's gone national. I don't know. There was a concert we did in a recording studio 2 summers ago, almost 2 years ago now. I did a video on the channel about it. That was cool. That was a lot of fun. We had the time in preparation to like create proper LUTs for that, and the resulting video looked really great. Team DLS, will you hook up more external monitors to your flat case in addition to the BMD dual monitors in the front? If I need to, yeah. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I'm putting the HDMI connections on the back here, to make that easy to do. But for the most part, I'm generally happy with just the built-in monitors. Thoughts on PTZ cameras for high action shoots like sports? Are they difficult to control for fast movement? Yes, they are. If you're doing anything with fast movement, don't go PTZ. You'll regret it. Are the camera converters still not 4K? They are not. Do you think Blackmagic will ever bother to update them after all these years? I think I probably can actually talk about this now. I'm going to switch to the front camera. So I've had conversations with the person at Blackmagic that's in charge of that, and the official response that I've gotten is it's not a high priority. So I'm not going to say it's never going to happen, but the chance of it happening, I think, is very low. So, yeah. What are your recommendations for budget encoders? Well, on a budget, I'd probably go the Hyperdeck Video X. There are some much less expensive ones that are out there. I don't know how good they are. I've been meaning to bring one in for testing for the channel. I just haven't gotten around to doing it. I think you meant including the non-Caesars jobs like Little Caesars. That's pretty notable. Including software. So yeah, I actually have had some big successes in terms of exposure with that. In the late 90s, I produced some software. It's called FlyPack PC. some Windows software on Windows that's designed to back up files. It did some unique things that nobody else was doing, and relatively easy to use. Still some people using it today, even 20 years later, more than 20, 25 years later. But it gained some notoriety back in the day. So in 1998, when it was first publicly available, I won multiple awards from a lot of different websites from that. And then later on, it actually became the official backup software used by several big companies. Not necessarily company-wide, but I had some pretty, some of the examples. I'm probably okay to talk about it now. It's been long enough, but IBM used it, HP used it, Pfizer used it, Siemens used it, the Department of Defense used it, several research labs for the United States used it. Yum Brands, which is the parent company, they've since renamed, but it's the parent company for like Taco Bell. They use my backup software. It's been long enough now that I've forgotten a lot of them. But yeah, like a sizable portion of the companies in the Fortune 500 had purchased some licenses for it. Not necessarily huge volumes, but yeah, with some volume and some visibility. So yeah. Team Duelos, what was the most exciting thing you saw at NAB? That's an interesting question, because NAB this year really came across to me as being not a place for big announcements. In the past, it's always been, if you got a big product announcement you want to do at any time in the first part of the year, save it for NAB. Companies aren't doing that anymore. You know, we've got access to the internet, and then since COVID, the need for, the number of in-person events has drastically shifted, and obviously NAB didn't happen for a number of years. I still need to do fiber. So NAB, there weren't many new products announced there. And there were some, but there weren't a lot. And so there wasn't anything in there that I was surprised by. Except for one thing, and that was the number of digital virtual sets that were there. And I didn't publish it, but when we were there, Paul and I were shooting a lot of videos, like quick videos, like just kind of joking about the number of digital virtual sets that we were seeing. Maybe I'll eventually edit that and publish it. But there were dozens of them. They were everywhere. And it's just kind of a running joke amongst us that they were just everywhere. And they've always had a lot of green screens at NAB, but this year they were taking it to the next level with like capturing camera motion and using that to render a background, virtual background behind the presenter in real time. More than I've ever seen before. Like I say, it was everywhere. It seems like there's a bunch of people that figured, hey, this is the next big thing, and invested a ton of time and money into developing products around that. And I suspect the majority of them will never go anywhere. But yeah, that was kind of the surprising thing, is just the number of those. So probably not the answer you were expecting, but that's kind of, that was my takeaway. The other thing that was a little surprising was how small the show was. There were a lot fewer people there than there have been in the past. Oh, wait a minute, I've got that one. I've got that fiber thing mounted upside down. I'll have to fix that. Will there be a big switch on? Yes, there will. Yes. Once I make these last handful of connections. Power the sucker up and maybe even hook it up to the ATEM Mini so we can see the output of it. I just connect these. Go to overhead for this. Whoops. Oh, can't do the overhead. That camera battery died. If I need to, I can replace it, but I'll just skip that for now. Have I noticed a decrease in gig opportunities due to venues starting to implement their own systems in the last month alone? I lost 2 clients since their concert venues now do their own stuff. Maybe some, but I find that those kind of things tend to be temporary, because once they figure out that they don't really know what they're doing, they'll start hiring people again. So I wouldn't be concerned about that. When you're hiring a professional, you're not hiring them for their equipment, you're hiring them for their knowledge and experience. And once people figure that out, you'll find that your job is actually fairly secure. So, yeah. The most valuable people working in video are the ones who have the experience to make things run smoothly. All right. Your videos ever stop bonding and ever have to reboot the device? I ever have had issues with encoders stop working. It's not very common. I need to flip this one real quick, so I'm gonna grab out my screwdriver. Somehow I got the second fiber adapter installed upside down. This being my first NAB this year, I wasn't impressed all that much. It was a much smaller show than it has been in the past. Everybody I talked to there was basically saying the same thing. We were just kind of shocked at how few people there were. It was far less crowded than I've ever seen before. And not only that, like only half of the convention center was actually being used this time. In the past, it's been essentially all of it. So a lot fewer vendors. And yeah, just way smaller than it ever has been. So I'm still glad I went, you know. And it's so easy for me to go from where I live, you know. It's only a 5-hour drive to Las Vegas from here, which I know for anybody outside the United States sounds like it's really far, but inside the US, 5 hours is really not much at all. So I don't have to worry about plane. It's actually probably just as fast to drive as it is to fly from here. Because by the time you leave for the airport, get checked in, go through security and all that nonsense. From Salt Lake, it's like an hour and a half flight. So you can maybe save half hour to maybe an hour by flying. But then you don't have your vehicle and you have to rent something or take public transportation everywhere. Just not worth the hassle. So, and my friends and I, when we go, we just drive. And this year we took my friend's Paul's car, and he has a Prius, and so we got amazing gas mileage. Most years we take my truck. Okay. All right. Everything's connected, all of them. So shove that in the rack. It's resisting a little bit. Some of those cables are a little stiff. And we'll get it in there. And I'll get some power hooked up and we'll fire her up. I'm sure there's something I've forgotten. That's just how these things go. All right, where'd I put my other screw? What's my favorite food? I have a hard time answering what's my favorite anything questions. These opinions change all the time. Favorite alcoholic beverage? I actually don't drink, so that one I can say I don't have one. But in terms of favorite foods, I find myself eating your traditional American foods more than anything else. Sandwiches, cereals, hamburgers, that kind of stuff. Just kind of my go-to. Okay. What am I missing? So I don't have power for the studio converter, and I also don't have power for the video, and I don't have network for the video. So I'm missing a handful of things still. I have cables for that. I thought I had an extra power cable. I'm missing something. I should have one more power cable in here. All right, yeah, I'll take care of some of those things a little later. Let's see. There's power for the video. Plug that in here. If I could eat anything right now, what it would be? Gosh. I can go for some pizza right about now, I guess, maybe. Actually, I have some leftovers in my refrigerator. I might eat after I'm done here. Okay. All right, cable go in there. Okay. Power. Not going to reach my power adapter. I'm going to have to grab an extension cable. I'll be right back. You guys come with me on a trip to my garage. All right, I'll fire this thing up. See if it works. I gotta find out where that one goes. Are there any questions I get on my channel that I hate? What's on your blocked word spam filter? I don't think I have anything. I don't think I've ever added anything to my blocked filter. The questions that I hate, though, I don't know that I necessarily hate it. It does get a little annoying when I get the same questions over and over again. But I understand that, like, not everybody's going to watch every video I ever put out, so yeah, it makes sense. It's logical. Alrighty, I'll secure that a little bit later, but at least boot it up. All right, well, we got no signal right now, but that's because it's not routed, I assume. So let's go to consult my list of inputs here. Alrighty, so this output is on monitor's on output 8. So come to outputs, set, monitor or output 8. Comes from ME1, which is going to come from camera 19. Yeah, there we go, multi-view. I have to say that doesn't look amazing. Probably already some scaling going on there. All right, and output 10, which is this one. That's going to come from ME1, which I think, yeah, it's input 1 right now. So I'm going to go to bars, dissolve, bingo. All right, and then in the recorder down here, that is our player. That's output number 11. Output 11 is on ME1, fine, and output 12, which is this one, is on the ME1 as well. So it appears to be working. Bingo. Nice. Oh, that's offline. That makes sense. I don't have Ethernet plugged in. Let me take care of that real quick. Plug in internet. A video asking if I clean my LC fiber connectors. I do, yeah. However, it's a great range on that. My garage is quite literally right there. So, you think you ever have a need for NDI or ever want to start using it? I wouldn't say never, but the fact that I'm using hardware-based switchers makes NDI a little bit harder to justify, because I'd have to invest in converters to convert back from NDI to SDI or HDMI. So that makes it more expensive. So. For April Fools, I should add things like video camera encoding to the block filter. I'll try and remember that for April 1st. I get a real old school Linus Tech Tips vibe from the kitchen view. Yeah, it is kind of similar to that, isn't it? That's funny. I hadn't even thought about that. How many platforms do you find yourself streaming to on average? You use ShareLink. I'm just curious how often it's worth the price. New AJ Hilo Plus having 2 destinations, but it seems. Most of the time I actually steer people towards YouTube, honestly, because it just consistently works and everybody knows how to use it. Even when we need to do private things, we'll just do an unlisted video and then put it behind a password protected web page. If we need something that's more protected than that, we'll go with Vimeo, or the pro account. I don't have a pro account myself, but I know somebody who does, and he lets me use it whenever I need to. So, yeah. Interested in building a minimalist trailer. Hey Danny, how's it going? Interested in building a minimalist trailer. A FlyPack might be ideal. Plan to use a Teradeck Video Go with 2x node modems, H.265, and Hyperdeck core. Yeah, that's a great way to go. That's one of the things you get with a Video Go that you don't get with their other products, or most everything on the market, is the fact that it can do H.265 encoding, which cuts your upload bandwidth in half. The downside is you have to transcode that on the back end. And cause, like for example, YouTube doesn't accept H.265 for streaming. So, Andres, do you ever do any esports productions? Curious your thoughts on it. I have never done esports. It's an interesting world, but it's not something I've ever actually done anything with myself. Yeah, I mean, I totally could. One of the big challenges there is, like, if you want to be able to get audio from all the different people who are playing the games, you're talking about a fairly massive audio ingest system. Studio Technologies makes a pretty cool box for that, Dante based. It includes like pass-through so they can hear their own audio, a connection for audio from the game. Ways to do announcements. That's pretty slick. If I was going to do that seriously, I'd invest in some of those. So yeah. Another camera channel. Have you ever met any of the other live streaming tech YouTubers in real life? Was there anything that surprised you about them? Well, at NAB, I met Photo Joseph and Aaron Parecki in person. Anything that surprised me about them? No, not really. I mean, I I interact with those guys on a fairly regular basis, so meeting them in person, there was no big surprises. It was just like, yeah, I already know these guys. So, yeah, no real big surprises there. Andres, 10 years experience with esports, yeah. Yeah, I haven't been asked to provide a video for any of those things. What was the product I just said? So there's a comm unit from Studio Technologies. I don't know the model number. You can go to studio-tech.com and look for it. They've got a box there that handles all the audio associated with doing esports. So, yeah. All right. Okay, well, this does appear to work. I'll do a couple of other tests here. So, for example, I'll take my computer, connect that up to the HDMI input that I've got. Boy, that HDMI is a lot longer than it used to be. So, HDMI input 9. And then come around to the front. And nothing. It looks like that doesn't have power. All right, for sake of discussion, what can I do there? You have a video explaining cache on Blackmagic Dyn 4K Web Presenter. For some reason, my cache keeps filling up so quickly, even though I have 600 megabit internet. That's exactly what happened to me yesterday. I have not done a video about it. Specifically, I did mention it in my video on Starlink, streaming using Starlink. But yeah, that's exactly what happened to me yesterday. So my live stream yesterday, if you didn't watch it, it basically didn't work. I was streaming using Web Presenter 4K, and yeah, like right after I went live, it started buffering really bad for people who were watching, and the cache on the device filled up, and I ended up having to completely unplug the device, and then plug in, and then you go to my backup encoder, which is just a Web Presenter HD. Which did work for the rest of it, but yeah, I had big problems with the Web Presenter 4K, and I have gigabit symmetrical. I have gigabit up and down, so my internet connection is plenty fast. It should certainly, yeah, there we go. So we got video from the computer on there. So I just need a different way to power that. Yeah, my internet connection is plenty fast. The 25 megabit that I was trying to do with the Web Presenter 4K, you couldn't get it out. So yeah, it was not great. Which is funny because I tested it for hours and hours and hours before the live stream, and it worked just fine, and just died 10 minutes before. Started to act up, but 10 minutes before the stream yesterday. So, what I use for instant replay, I am using vMix for instant replay. Yeah, so I have a DeckLink 8K Pro card in a computer in my trailer. It gives me 4 inputs, and then I have a separate card that I use for output, so I'm able to do 4 camera replay with that. Works great. Works really well. So, what am I expecting this box to weigh in when it's complete? I'm guessing it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 35 to 40 pounds. If that, maybe less, 30 pounds. It's totally manageable, completely manageable. So, did you ever use vMix? A lot of people use it instead of hardware switchers. I talked about software switchers in this stream twice already, so you have to rewind and talk about it. I like to do Blackmagic ATEM SDI switchers better than the ATEM Mini for mobile rigs, simply because reliability of the connectors in a high vibration environment. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, HDMI connections will come loose eventually in something like this. In fact, I didn't do it yet, but I have somewhere there it's on the floor. I have some thread blocker that I'm going to put on the HDMI connections once I know they're working, and help them from coming loose. Help to prevent them from coming loose. So, yeah. All right. Okay. Well, what else? I will open up the camera converter that I had here sitting around, and make sure that the fiber portion of this is working, and then probably end the stream, and then yeah, I'll just do the final cleanup here and call this one good. So this stream has been live for, what time is it? Yeah, it's over 3 hours. So I'll weigh it somewhere between too light to cart and too heavy to lift easy. Yeah, that's probably about right. But it does have handles on the side. I've carried this thing decent. I mean, this is going to weigh probably a little bit more than it did before when I had the television studio, but not by much. The difference is going to be pretty minimal. So it should be quite manageable. All right, camera converter. Obviously brand new. I wasn't shopping for one, but a couple of these came up on eBay for next to nothing, so I bought them. I bought two of them, which means I think I have about 10 of these things now. It's one of those things you can never have too many of, like cameras. Never have too many cameras. Or HDMI cables. I'm going to need to find a fiber cable. I don't think I have one readily available. Go out to the garage again. Hope that there's one in the garage. There should be. That's not one. Sure, we'll go with a 75 meter one. That'll work. A 75 meter cable. And somehow it got wrapped up with gaffer's tape instead of a Velcro tie. Can't explain that. Alright, so take and plug it into the fiber connections here on one end, and then into camera converter on the other end. I wonder if it has a charge at all. These have built-in batteries. Oh, that's dead. Completely dead. Not surprising. All right, grab some power right here. Okay, all right, so that's coming on, and then I'm going to take my computer, plug that into the HDMI input on this, and then that should be available on input 1. Oh, right, I don't have power on that. Yeah, okay, that's another thing I need to solve. I will just steal power from one of the Hyperdecks for right now, until I can find that other power cable, which I know is in here. Yeah. Definitely need to neaten up some of these cables. My philosophy is usually get it working first, and then and then neaten it up. There we go. Yep. There we go. So you can see that now. That is HDMI output of the computer going into camera converter and going over fiber into the back of the rack, into the camera converter down here, and then into the switcher. And just for reference, the output of the switcher, make sure I get the right input here. So output number 1 goes to the studio converter. That should be outputs. Output 1 is ME1. Yeah, so program feed, whatever is live, is going back here. And if I was to plug a monitor in, the HDMI output on here, that would have the program feed on it. So, and this also has comms. So just plug in a headset right here, and then can talk to the camera operators. Plugged in headsets plugged into that. So I got intercom, switcher, recording, playback, 2 monitors, live streaming, all in one rack. So check to see for any last minute questions, but I think that's going to basically do it for today. Wrap it up. We need live video hosting server update, please. I'm not sure what you mean. Yeah, do I think SRT will ever replace RTMP? Yes, eventually. Yeah. Recap of the gear that's in it. All right, so yeah, very quickly go over what gears in here. Covered at the beginning, but we'll do it again. So Smart View Duo monitor. So 2 SDI monitors. It's kind of an older unit. They're fairly low resolution, 800 by 480 or thereabouts. The new ATEM 2ME Constellation HD. Brand new switcher just came out. 20 inputs, 12 outputs, 2 MEs, Supersource, 2 DVEs, 8 color keyers. They have Hyperdeck Studio Mini, the older one from 2017. It's used for video playback, and I use that one because it has a separate A and B output for key and fill for alpha channel. One of the newer Hyperdeck Studio Mini HDs for recording. And then a Hyperdeck Video Pro for doing live streaming. And the output of that, or the input of that, comes from the Hyperdeck here. And then on the bottom I have the Blackmagic Studio Converter 2 specifically, which converts to and from fiber. Also provides intercom capability. So that's where we're at. And then on the back side, there's a 16-port network managed PoE switch. There's a internet router inside, and then power switches, and then of course the I/O panel on the back, which I will show briefly one last time. So fiber input 1, 2, 3, 4, and then SDI inputs 5, 6, 7, 8, and HDMI input, 4 SDI outputs, 1 HDMI output, and then audio inputs are left and right going into the switcher. So there you go. That's it. So I can't leave you. We're hanging out. Well, for one, I need to get some food. I haven't eaten since breakfast. Okay, yeah, something I meant to talk about and didn't. What ATEM control panel do you use, or you just use the ATEM front panel? I will be using one of my X keys panels, 80 key X keys panels with just macros. I also will have available Stream Deck, and I'll use that with Companion sometimes. I still don't trust Companion. I've just had it act up on me too many times. So, yeah. Danny, in a minimalist tray where the first thing I'd replace in FlyPack is the monitoring. For that, I can go something larger outside the rack case. For far as the rack case, SKB gig rig would work. Yeah, the gig rigs are kind of cool. I had one of their original ones from late 90s. I really like that case a lot. I only recently got rid of it, only because I was moving and didn't have the space for it. But the gig rigs are cool. But yeah, higher quality monitoring would be awesome. And the main reason I did with this, what I did here, is because it's I wanted to keep this to 6U on the rack and keep it nice and small. And 2 7-inch monitors was a great way to go. So, I don't know if you guys can hear that. My stomach's really making a lot of noises. It's time to eat. So anyway, I think that's going to about do it now. Thanks for those who tuned in, especially those who watched the whole time. This has been going for 3.5 hours. Is that right? Yeah, 3.5 hours. So I will do another separate video summarizing what's here. Because I know that not everybody's going to want to watch. So yeah. So someone asking if the opticals go into the camera converter. Yes. Yeah, these camera converters use fiber. So that's got a fiber cable. LC single mode fiber. And in this case, that's a 75 meter cable. But I've gone much farther. Yeah. So, well, there we go. All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching and tuning in. And I should have another video coming out here before too long. I shot a video last weekend about the difference between the different Hyperdeck products because there's a lot of difference in functionality from one to the next. So I'll put that one out as soon as I have a chance to edit it. And yeah, again, I'll do a wrap-up video about what this thing is separately, hopefully before too long. So anyway, thanks everyone. We'll catch you on the next one. See you later.